All right, it is 6:04 p.m. We are calling the Wednesday, May 31st Complete Streets Commission meeting to order. Let's start with establishing our quorum. Let's take attendance. Vice Chair Van Petrolone. Here. Commissioner Ambiel. Present. Commissioner Snyder. Present. Commissioner Ouyang. Present. And Commissioner Katz and Commissioner Maloof are absent today. So we have 5 members present. We have a quorum. Next on our agenda is we're going to take public comments for items not on the agenda. If you're attending in person, you may submit a comment card to myself or to our staff person, and we will call on you. And then we will, after that, go to the Zoom meeting. And if anyone on Zoom has a question or comment, we won't be discussing anything you say, but we will be hearing you. You may raise your hand on the Zoom app. So let's start with the in-person speakers. Do we have a speaker card? Could we call you a speaker, please?
Yes, we have one speaker, Liza Coe. Hi. Go ahead.
So the microphone is open in the room. You just broadcast your voice a little bit. Yeah.
So it's stand by here.
Sure. Great.
Hi, my name's Liza Coe. I live at 610 Cuesta and have lived there since I was born, which is getting close to 70 years now. I am a huge proponent of the traffic calming iterations that you all have supported up to this point. However, I need to make you aware of a very significant problem with the current iteration. In the past 2 weeks, I've had 2 very serious near misses, and my son actually had this one this morning with what we call table dodgers. So they're the guys that go around the tables. Here's what happened. So this is Cuesta, this is west, this is east, this is my house, this is Suresh's house. Okay, the first incident was I went out my driveway, went to my mailbox, and as I turned to look in my mailbox and then turned back around, I was face to face with a sedan that was on the sidewalk and was coming straight for me until he dodged back in. 2 cars after him followed his path around here while I was standing right here. And actually, I had jumped back kind of into the bushes by that point. The second incident was I was backing out of my driveway, intending to go east. I looked both ways. There was no traffic coming west. There was a truck coming this way toward this table. I backed out of the driveway and I checked both ways. I'm a very careful driver. I turned, and by the time I turned forward, I was facing the grill of an F-150. Okay, he ended up dodging again, swerving into this lane to miss me. Okay, and I proceeded on my way. Just this morning, my son was backing out to go west, and he saw somebody coming down this way, but calculated that the guy was going slow enough, there was enough space, blah blah blah. But by the time he backed into the lane to go this way, the guy had dodged the table and then went around him and continued down to the stop sign. And that's only 2. I have told my neighbors up and down Cuesta using Nextdoor, and I got over 50 responses with people with similar horror stories. We're very concerned about pedestrians, bicyclists, kids, dogs, everybody else that uses that street or is on it. We all love the rural feel of Los Altos, and I, for one, have fought for it for years. But I think we need to come to grips with the fact that Cuesta is not a rural street. It is a suburban thoroughfare and needs to be designed as such. And right now, it's not. We've talked about 2 ideas. One is to kind of give up on the rural thing and go with the concrete sidewalks with curbs that prevent people from hopefully dodging up onto the curbs. And also possibly installing the tables all the way across instead of just half. We ask that you pay attention to this problem. It is serious because we fear that sooner rather than later, somebody is gonna get really hurt. And, and, right, and that's really all I have to say is to plead, to hope that this gets put up for discussion at some point, because it is a huge safety issue. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in person, and we can't discuss your comments right now. But I think our transportation staff has heard you, and for safety incidences, you can always contact the police department too. Are there any public comments online? Does anybody on the Zoom want to raise their hand to make public comments for items not on the agenda? For items on the agenda, we will be giving opportunities for each of those items to make public comments. So no other comments for public comments not on the agenda. Let's move to our consent calendar. Our consent calendar is to approve our CSC meeting minutes for our joint meeting with the Planning Commission on March 23rd and our regular meeting on March 29th. Do any commissioners have any clarifications or questions, or is there anyone from the public who would like to make a comment on our consent calendar before I call for a motion in a second? Comments, no questions, no changes. Can I have a motion?
Motion to approve meeting minutes from March 23rd, 2023 and the CSC regular meeting minutes on March 29, 2023 without changes.
And can I have a second for the motion? So we have a motion by the Vice Chair Van Pagemon, a second by Commissioner Snyder, and let's do a voice vote for the minutes. So everyone who is a yes and I, raise your hand, please. So we have 5 yeses. So that motion carries with 2 people absent. Now we're going to move on to our regular agenda. The first item we have on there is a countywide active transportation plan update. We have some guests with us today for that item. I just want to announce before this item starts that I, out of an abundance of caution, because of the location of my residence being near the expressway, I'm going to recuse from this item today and hand it over to the Vice Chair. And I'll be over there when you finish. Call me on back. Good luck.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I'll just pop up that menu.
Yeah, just hand it over to staff first. As usual, we'll do the staff presentation followed by public comments. And do we have public comments on this item? Do we know yet?
I received a couple via email, which I forwarded to the group.
Yeah.
I don't know of any others this time.
Okay, and take public comments, then go to commissioner questions. Well, I go to commissioner questions first, as usual, yeah. Then public comments and then back to commissioner comments. Staff.
Well, I'll go ahead and introduce the countywide ATP project, which is being done by the County of Santa Clara. And here we have 2 guests, Ben from the County of Santa Clara and Mauricio, the consultant from Alta Planning and Design. So they'll be presenting on the countywide active transportation plan.
Yeah, so thank you for having us today. I'm Ben Abinio from the Roads and Post Department. I'm the Associate Transportation Planner. And today I have Mauricio Hernandez, who's my staff on this project. So I'll hand it up to him to present the transportation plan.
Thanks, Ben. And I do apologize for taking my glasses off. I'm getting to that age where some things work and some things are there. All right, yeah, as Ben mentioned, we're here to present about the active Santa Clara County ATP, as we call it, Active Transportation Plan. We're just really excited because we've been going around the county to a number of different places and a number of different commissions. You guys are one of the last ones that we got to, but we're glad that we got to. Before we begin, I do have to highlight, if you just remember one thing from this presentation is the website and the fact that we have, you're able to review all the recommendations on the website. you're able to leave comments. You're also able to provide some comments to us. All of those emails get to us. All of the data that's being included there also gets to us. Right now, you're seeing a semi-live version of it, and all of these are comments from people, but also our recommendations. So you're able to click on the recommendations and really review what we're recommending. For today, we wanted to kind of provide you guys an overview, or you all an overview of what we've been doing for the past few months. We haven't come to you until this point. We do want to kind of provide a very summarized agenda in terms of what we've been doing and provide you kind of a scope of where we've been focusing on and what the project is all about, and where we want to take this after this. So in terms of the project introduction, I do want to highlight every comment that you provide us is we really do appreciate it. We are focusing on county expressways and roadways in unincorporated parts of the county. So keep in mind as you review the recommendations and as you hear that today, we are only dealing with these. That being said, the recommendations that we're pushing forward for the plan or in the plan, both at the policy, programmatic, and of course the infrastructure level, they are all being coordinated with regional organizations as also our more localized priorities like BTA, as well as Los Altos, as well as MTC. So everything's all related to each other. In terms of our tasks, you can see them here. I'm not going to go through them really much. We did an existing conditions to really understand where, what, and how, and why. We also went through a very extensive public engagement process. We've been going at it for almost 2 years on reaching out to different parts of the county and different populations. I'll get in a little bit. I'll provide more details on that since it has been that much. We also did understand using the existing conditions and some of the roadway conditions. We went into a network analysis that really helped us develop the recommendations, which we are at this point presenting. And after that, we're going to define the projects that we want to push forward, as well as prioritize those depending on a few different rubrics. In terms of the timeline, this is one of those COVID projects, so it's taking a little bit longer than usual. We were marked by COVID, so we started very much online, then we went a little public, then back online, then I'm just happy that I'm seeing happy faces over here for the recommendations. I'm assuming you guys are happy, right? We are at the recommendations phase, so at this point we're requesting feedback from the community on the recommendations that we're putting out. After that, we're going to take all of our recommendations and your recommendations, mesh them together, as well as prioritize them, and then publish a draft plan so that the community will also have an input on that. And then hopefully by the end of the year, in the winter of 2023, 2024, we'll have a plan that we can push forward for final approval. Again, providing a quick summary of what we've been doing. These analyses, particularly the health and equity analyses, will be helping us to really focus on how to prioritize, how to prioritize and where to prioritize for all of these things. We wanted to understand where the more disadvantaged folks live. So this is not just Los Altos, this is not just the northern part. I am just presenting today the northern part of the county since we're talking about Los Altos, but we wanted to understand where the highest concentration of equity priority communities, as defined by the Regional Transportation Commission, or MTC, are located. And for the most part, many of those communities are in San Jose, in the core of San Jose, in the northern part, and also on the southern part. There are pockets in Gilroy and kind of in the southern parts of the county. Likewise, we did an analysis of health components. So basically, we looked at life expectancy, high blood pressure, heart disease, cancer, or prevalence of cancer, and of course, diabetes. Mesh them together, and we understood where, again, the highest prevalence of health missed equities, if I can make up a word today, are, again, very much located in those areas where I mentioned before, on East San Jose, some of the foothills, and of course, some of the pockets unincorporated areas. As part of this existing conditions, we also looked at what's going on the roadways in terms of collisions. Some folks call it collisions, some folks call them crashes. I'm gonna refer to them as collisions. Again, we very much started in 2021, so we had data up until 2020. We used the latest 5-year data to understand where the highest incidence of collisions were and the types of collisions that were happening. We really try to identify those collision hotspots, and really where the biggest problems are throughout the county. Of course, we try to look at it from the intersection perspective, but also at the corridor level, we have to look at the road in a complete way, as a complete street. So we categorize those into intersection collisions. So those collisions that happen within 250 feet of each intersection on each leg, as well as the roadway corridors, which is basically just the longer side of streets. The source of the data that we use is Crossroads, which is pretty much up to the minute level. The county had lots of really good information and lots of really good data on that. And I am going to be presenting mostly aggregated data for the full county. I do apologize, I don't have just specific ones for Los Altos, but I'm sure folks know where many of them are located. At the aggregate level, we did see that the collisions by year have dropped, which is a good thing. However, we still had some very higher numbers in terms of fatal collisions, both for people walking and people biking. I do have to kind of put an asterisk on the people biking because people on a scooter sometimes are also categorized in this. So it really much depends on how it is categorized by the police person. That goes on to the collision. At the aggregate level, again, just wanted to show you some trends. We are seeing this pretty much everywhere throughout the country. The collisions happen usually when it's warmer, when there's more traffic, and that really kind of in the midpoint where more people drive. So again, where we have the best weather over here is usually from, I would say, August through October. And that's when we actually experience most of the collisions. Then on the collisions by day, it's very normalized. Usually more people drive on Wednesdays and Thursdays. So that's when we did expect most collisions to happen. At the same time, the peak of peak, so the peak in the afternoon, that's where most people tend to, that's when we experience most collisions. This is also very much tied to the lighting situation. So when there's less lighting or natural lighting, that's when many of these occur. At the aggregate level, again, 55 of those collisions resulted in severe injuries, maybe something with an arm, something with a leg. It's hard to clarify or classify each one of those unless you really dig in deep on the data. 25 of those were fatal collisions. And again, there were some injuries. And it was still, while it was trending down, it's still kind of hard to understand or really realize that 7% of those collisions are fatal. This is how we mapped them. So you'll see the number of collisions at intersections as well as the roadway collisions. For this area in particular, not a big surprise to folks. Foothill really did come up very highlighted with 6 to 12 on intersections and more than 4 in some places throughout the expressway. Again, I do want to highlight this is 2015 to 2020 data. We have not updated the data since then. We have seen generally in the Bay Area that these trends have changed through COVID. Again, very much highlighting the high injury network. This is where most of the collisions have basically like a top 10 most difficult places to bike on or walk. The intersection of Foothill and Rastro, it's very much highlighted at signalized intersections. And then once again, Foothill is one of those that really does come to the top when we rank them in comparison to the others. Generally speaking, countywide, that's where most of our collisions happen on expressways. There are a number of collisions in more localized streets in unincorporated areas, but the expressways do tend to experience most of the collisions.
Why do you have foothill in there twice?
Thank you first.
I do apologize.
But the numbers are different too.
There's different, that's a good point. There's different cutting spots. I can't remember what number 7 is, but I think it's the top portion of it, which or the northern part. I do apologize for that. Thank you for highlighting that. On the community outreach side, we again, this is going to be very high level. We really wanted to focus on going out there to the community and being inventive. So we hosted a number of pop-up events, as well as really going to different places that were already there. So in some of the photos, you'll see some of the pop-up events that we conducted. And also we did work with a number of CBO organizations, community-based organizations. Thank you, Marissa. To really reach, so they serve as partners of ours in the community. They're the ones that know the communities the most. So for each of the districts, we work with community-based organizations based on the district to really help us amplify the voice of the community, but also serve as kind of an advisor of things that are working, things that are not. And so we really focused on having the project website, the interactive map, going out to the community rather than them coming to us. We were able to host a couple of pop-ups earlier in the later part of the pandemic, I should say. And so you see some of the boards and some of the conversations that we had. We also talked to a number of community advisors or the TAG, as well as stakeholder meetings. We held some of those. This is kind of what the map looked like. People were able to really pinpoint where and how they were getting to and from places, but as well as difficult areas for walking and biking. Just this is kind of a summary of what we heard. Difficult places to walk and bike are expressways. There are concerns with safety and there are concerns with speeding for people driving. Most of the comments that we received are really much about the expressways and the difficulty in them serving or them exposing some difficulties in terms of crossing and or going from one spot to the other. As I mentioned, we did some pop-up events. One of the big ones was Viva Calle almost 2 years ago now. And we really focused on going out to communities that never come to us, that are unable to come to us. So you see that a number of these events were very much focused on Down County. That said, we did receive many of the comments that we received in phase 1 did come from the northern parts of the county, which is what we expected. So we wanted to go out there to different communities too. As I mentioned, CBO meetings, we did kind of worked with a number of CBOs. This is only phase 1. We are completing now phase 2, which is very much doing this, but doing what we're doing today, but with CBO partners. We work with these community-based organizations, really focusing on asking the questions, the tough questions on where people bike, where people walk, what are the issues that they're seeing, and really what we heard again was very much about safety and about lack of connectivity between facilities. So this is the latest part of this analysis. After we heard from the community on what the issues are, we really looked into just utilizing data to really understand what the issues were. So if my computer moves, sorry. I'm not showing all of the maps that we provided because those are almost 100 pages worth of maps, right, Ben? 100 pages worth of maps and analyses, but we really focused on understanding the bicycle level of traffic stress, the pedestrian level of traffic stress, really how the network all connects and how it all acts with each other, whether it is a county roadway or another roadway that connects onto it. We really wanted to understand where there's marked crosswalks or where there's no crosswalks at all, where there's sidewalks in some places of the county, there's no sidewalks at all, particularly in southern parts of the county where there should be, especially closer to transit. And we really did want to understand the active trip potential. So if we change the mode, how far could people go walking and or biking, and how many people would actually do that? Again, the existence of sidewalks. So in very, very condensed terms, we used all of these analyses and put them into what we call a primary network gap analysis. And so this really highlighted us which intersections and which roadways really, excuse me, represent the biggest barriers for people and the biggest difficulties. It's not because there is a gap in the particular network, but they just represent barriers for people to go from one place to the other. Whether it's because high speed, high collision data. Again, we used the collision analysis for all of this. And then we came up with a number of kind of spots along the expressways and at intersections with the expressways where we saw the need for improved cohesion of the system and improved safety for the system. I'm mostly showing the northern part, again, very much focused on Los Altos today, but there are just a number of primary network gaps identified for the southern parts of the county too, although not as many because, again, the expressways really took it all. We wanted to compare apples to apples rather than to break it into different parts. For here, again, no surprise, Foothill still acting as a network gap and very much Foothill and Magdalena. That was a big one. So we noted those. And just north of here, Oregon Expressway, sorry, I'm a little. Oregon Expressway also acting as a primary network gap. So we used existing conditions, public engagement, and gaps analysis to really understand what we could do with what we have. And with what we have, I mentioned the right-of-way, existing right-of-way for the county within the roadways, how much space we have. So I'm going to talk first about the bicycle recommendations, and then we'll get into the pedestrian recommendations. The bicycle recommendations tend to focus on corridor level improvements. You'll see that some more focalized or more spot improvement type of arrangements are kind of tackling both bike and ped. You'll see that a little later. So how did we develop the recommendations? Again, it was very much about the community feedback and what we saw in the data, or basically what the data corroborated and what the community corroborated from the data. The concerns were very much about connectivity, safety, and really network cohesion. So we really needed to repair and improve some of the safety aspects of people walking and people biking. So we also used the primary network gaps. And again, as I mentioned to Stacy, the VTA VPAC got a little bit more of an extensive presentation and much more specialized. This is the abbreviated version, but we used all of these analyses to put it all together. And that said, we recommended everything from class ones, and I'm not going to talk Caltrans classification, but I'm going to call them by their names. So we called for 38 miles of shared use paths that people do use. For the most part, in the northern parts of the county, we really focused on with the right-of-way that we have, there could be a potential for implementing separated bikeways, either bi-directional or one-directional at either side of the expressways. There's the space. There is just a need to understand if it is feasible and how. So again, this is a master planning level analysis, which also focuses in a very, very large county in the area. So I don't have specifics on particular design improvements at a particular intersection. However, at this high of a level and planning level recommendations, we are recommending that many of the improvements are more separated to provide better protection and better separation and safety for people walking and biking. This one will be biking. You'll see here in the southern part of the county, it changes a little bit more. We see a lot more people biking recreationally. So the yellow lines that you see here, the yellow dotted lines, we have them as bike routes, signed bike routes. So that the more Lycra folks like myself, the folks that feel comfortable biking anywhere and everywhere, they can actually do that. At the same time, for those folks that are the mom and pop that need a little bit more help, we did create a bit of a network through trails. And again, this is being coordinated with the trails, with Parks and Rec Department. So their recommendations are very much linked to our recommendations. Our recommendations are linked to theirs. So there was a cross-pollination and cross-reading. For Los Altos or close to Los Altos, we're recommending class 3s or bike routes, signed bike routes, and kind of the more neighborhoody, what I call neighborhoody streets. But I think the important part to highlight is the Oregon Expressway and of course Foothill Expressway. We do see the potential to having implementing a class 4 separated bikeway. That is about 10.2 miles from 280 all the way to Oregon Expressway, and Oregon Expressway from Foothill to, what is it, 101, I believe. Again, these are very draft. We have more details online. You can actually link on each one of these lines and markers and really look into the spot improvements that we're calling for. I'll be talking about the spot improvements on the ped side of things, and I'll be highlighting what we're thinking of those. Shifting over to peds, they're a little bit of a slower user, so we have to consider those things on how much time it takes to cross, how much time it takes to go along. So you'll see that very many of these recommendations are along the expressways, either slip lane reconfigurations or improving curb ramps. And I'll talk a little bit about the reconfigurations and what we're talking about. We also would like to promote the idea of considering pedestrian hybrid beacons and our RFBs that are, my partner would tell you the RFBs, but sorry, RBFs. But RFBs are rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Of course, we do want to tighten up the intersection, so we are considering promoting the idea of reducing the turn radii at the intersections. I do realize that this map is a lot and it's very, very, very tiny, but again, you can zoom in on the map online and really take a look at each of the intersections that we're calling. Want to highlight a few ones on slip lane reconfigurations. It's basically mostly focused on Foothill, Del Monte, Magdalena, Arboretum, and Vineyard, as well as some of the implementations of sidewalks in some places. So whether it's not, you can tell us if we are correct, or if not, we are game as well. But yeah, we are really focusing on making it easy for people to walk from one place to the other and really making it harder for cars to go really, really fast on intersections. Can I say that? Okay. So what do we mean about slip lane elimination? So these are some of the examples that have already been implemented. I hope everybody can see my cursor, but at the top, this is from a few years ago at Plumeria and Montague, where they had slip lanes. So one of their configurations was basically closing it and tightening it up. That way, people driving southbound on Plumeria could not just go through the intersection really fast, but actually had to slow down a little bit and see if pedestrians were coming. This is an improvement that we are calling for, where we see a lot more potential for people walking and or biking. This is also called slip lane removal. There are some configurations that will need to be made kind of at that localized level. So again, these are very high level recommendations. On the reconfiguration, we're also tightening the angle. So again, it very much depends on what type of improvement we want to see. But by tightening the angle of the slip lane, you are slowing down a little bit the cars. That way, people walking can be seen and people driving can see people that are walking and biking. This is usually implemented in locations with high-speed turns, again, tightening that radii, that way you're not just going really fast on the intersection. The last one of the reconfigurations is really looking at kind of those interchanges that are just funky. Let's just say that, funky. This is kind of a concept that VTA has been working on with Caltrans, actually, on 680 and various. And what they did over here is, instead of having 1, 2, 3, 4 points of conflict, they just have one conflict point, but they also time it. So they would have a light here at the top and a light, a light at the top, and they would channelize a little bit of the cars. Again, this is still very much a concept, but it consolidates the on and off ramps. So this being the off ramp and this being the on ramp to southbound 680, sorry. And the same thing on the southern portion of Berryessa. It consolidates those points, and that way people that are going into the freeway have to slow down, as well as those that are coming out of the freeway. That way people walking and or biking can be seen. So that's also part of this conceptual plan, that it includes either separated bikeways or buffered bikeways, I should say, as well as a good points of crossing or good crosswalks as well. Moving on, because we want to have some recommendations that basically provide some oomph for the infrastructure improvements. We are really much looking forward to pushing equity. That this has been a really big component of everything. It has permeated throughout everything that we've done. So all of the recommendations that you're seeing now are very much focused on equity, particularly focusing on those EPCs, equity priority communities, and really trying to invest a little bit more where they have not seen investment in a while. This may be a bit of a controversial topic in some places, but on the engineering side, we do want to call for the county to update its county expressway bikeway accommodation guidelines. Basically saying accommodate, not just delineate. Designate and delineate at the same time. That's basically what we're saying. On the programmatic side, we also want to encourage folks to do so. So working internally to promote bike to work days, or nowadays, are we still to wherever, or still to wherever? Okay. And then bicycle friendly designation, that's also really good for the county to really be a part of, as well as partnerships with other agencies, as well as really just focusing on going after grants with other agencies right now. Money is the driver of many things, and infrastructure points that also to money. The last part of the encouragement side, your visitors also want to know where they're going. I will tell you that the first time that I biked Foothill, I got lost a couple times. So wayfinding is a big component of what we want to push forward for the county to really encourage people to walk and bike. Some of the other topics that we really are focusing on, or program and policy changes, is really education, which some of these the county and some of the local municipalities already do. Bike trains to school is one of them, for example. On the enforcement, which we don't like to call it enforcement anymore, we want to kind of promote that idea of traffic ticket reduction. So if you get a ticket, you go do a class with SVBC, for example, and they can help reduce that ticket, I will say. And this is being recorded, right?
Yes.
I got a ticket during COVID in Marin County, and I went through their traffic ticket reduction, and it went from $250 to $50. Did I deserve the ticket? Still TBD, but hey, $50 is better than the $250. And this was on a bike, I do apologize. Also evaluation, we really do want to know where people bike and or walk. So really having annual counts and collision reports, as well as really providing information about what's going on in the county, being very transparent about what's being built. County's already doing some of these things, but really putting information out for the community to really learn what's going on. And, oh my God, next steps. Again, one thing that you'll remember today is the website, right? ActiveSantaClaraCounty.org. We are opening the portal of until June 16th, so that's 2 weeks from Friday. That was to accommodate a couple more big events, including Viva Calle, as well as a few different jurisdictions that requested this. So that will be the last time that residents will be able to provide information or input on the recommendations. That being said, after we're done with this recommendation period, we'll move into the development of the plan, and you all will be able to opine on the actual plan. So the document will be posted online. You'll be able to mark it up, tell us if we missed a period or a comma, or if my Spanglish comes out in my English. So I do apologize for that. You can tell me that on it. Again, ActiveSantaClaraCounty.org. That is the website. You can check the recommendations. I see some of you already digging into that, so it's very encouraging. And with that, I will be opening it for questions. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So one more thing that I wanted to add was the next steps after this one was a master planning level study. So the next step will be a corridor level analysis that we were going to do on the expressway. And we were able to secure a grant from Measure B, and Fertile Expressway got awarded, I think, $450K, $1,000 of money from Measure B bike pay program to study this corridor. So as you see, the different intersections that Mauricio mentioned during his presentation will be analyzed closely, and what can be done really to alleviate the problems that are currently existing on the road will be addressed in that study. So that's a good news for the community because they were supportive in providing support letters for the county. I'm announced that we were successful.
Okay. You done? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to open it up for commissioner questions first before we get out to public comments. Let me know, so how many do we have, and we can decide how much time we want to allocate. Yeah.
So a couple questions. First of all, great study, just wonderful. The slip lane reduction or elimination, what's the traffic queuing impact of removing those slip lanes in those locations? Will we see more queuing and waiting at those intersections? Or do you think the impact is minimal?
The straight up answer is I don't know. It really depends on where it is. We have seen in some places they're minimal. We have seen in some others that it's a little bit higher, but we don't know until we do a full study, like a more feasibility study.
So you haven't done complete traffic counts at those intersections yet? to
Not at this
understand what
point,
the-
not
What the turning volume is?
correct, not at this point, but this is still a very, like, if you consider a master planning effort is a 10,000-foot study, then we move it to a 1,000-foot study, which is the feasibility study, then we move it to 500.
So
which is more.
It's possible that you'll get data that would contraindicate a removal of a slip lane.
It can, yes.
Okay, so that's all I wanted to understand there. The other question I had was, in your data, it's 2015 to 2020. We all know things happened in 2020. Shutdown started around March. How much of 2020 is included in your data? And is that step down of incidents a false indicator of a drop? Because if it includes all of 2020, we stopped driving about March 12th.
Sure.
And we didn't go back until about March 2022.
It's been a minute
Crazy.
since I like look at the data, so let me actually.
So,
point you
so
to
just,
that.
just trying to
Sure.
understand how much of an impact that is on your data. So if you keep going.
This is
that bar chart-
January, whoop,
bar chart,
this is January 15,
to
2015.
December 2020, so you're capturing 9 months of no driving in there.
Less driving is.
Well,
Only essential driving.
only essential driving to the grocery store. So, okay, so it just helps me understand because a lot of those corridors are commute corridors, not going to the shopping
Yeah, I mean,
grocery store corridor. So okay,
if
that
we look-
answers my question. I had a question on the Loyola Summerhill Loop, the bike route there. Is that a recommendation coming from the county because that's unincorporated?
correct. So that part of around is unincorporated, so yes. Computer.
If it is
Okay.
incorporated, it's under the jurisdiction of the
It's not city, it's not, so it's unincorporated and that's why. Okay, just clarifying for myself and folks listening. And then, two more question. Who pays for these improvements if they're approved? Is that the county
Yeah,
budget or is it a cost sharing?
so basically, what the plan is, the county roads and airports department gets its funding from tax, gas tax, so we employ the money on road improvements. But the bike paid related projects, depending on funding that we can allocate to the bike paid. We also are looking into grant applications to get money from the state and the federal government to enhance our budget or to help do these projects.
So will there be any expectation of Los Altos to fund any portion of the design or implementation?
That can be discussed with the city if the city has available funding that they can contribute towards an improvement. But as of right now, there's no expectation.
No
of the city.
expectation, okay. All right. Thank you, those are all my questions for right now. Thank you.
Anybody else? Tom?
Yeah, on these slip lanes or elimination, are you always gonna incorporate right turn only that's shared with cars and bicycles? And
That's supposed to.
well, so your pictures here show that's what you're doing on page 38. So I thought that was a good idea, because what I've seen when they do eliminate that is that if you, like, let's just get a bicycle and a car in the same lane that's shared. One can't pass the other. And so I've seen them get frustrated either way, who's ever in first kind of, well, if they don't want to. What's nice in the slip lane is that you can actually take a right turn on red, and so I think it alleviates wasted gas, but I understand the idea.
Right,
So I like where you're done, in that reducing the angle. But also where you have in that picture there, where you actually have a shared right lane, and then if a bicycle wants to go straight, you have the green lane.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good situation, but I don't know if that's gonna be in all cases.
yeah, I mean, again, these are just examples. This is not a cookie cutter approach. We can't just implement this same facility based on right of way availability, of course, traffic counts and all
Well,
that
I
stuff.
also, but how much real estate do you have?
Fair enough, but I do appreciate the comment because I also really love going on the green lane and just really appreciate having space for myself rather than competing with other cars or other people. So yeah, I think it's point well taken, and some improvements may not be because of the number of people driving the traffic counts, I should say. We may not implement specific improvements at specific places. We'll just have to do continue to study them a little bit more. Again, this is very master planning effort, so I could say, hey, let's implement this right here. I'm just telling you what we can see in professional opinion. with the right of way that we're using, with the amount of traffic that we're more or less seeing, we think it's possible.
Yeah, and also, this is done by the planning department, which is as a policy level, plan level study. So the traffic department, which oversees the operational aspect of the expressways and the rural roads and everything, will be having an opinion, which is a strong opinion, kind of implementing this improvement. So it's on a case by case basis and location dependent.
That's good. Comfortable.
Yeah, and also, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, on. The question on the primary network gap slide. I think you're showing. One gap, is that? Yeah, that's the.
In this one, but in big. You try to blow it up.
It's going,
Sorry,
it like leads to the 237. 34 there. Yeah, slide 34.
sorry, I don't have my slide. What's the name of
Oh.
the slide?
Bicycle network.
This is primary network gaps after needs analysis findings.
Most of this one.
Yeah. There's that blue network gap line that's running, leading to 237. Is that Grant Avenue, or can you speak a little, if that's in Los Altos, I just wanted to see.
Where number 12 is on the blue?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's,
Right here.
It's the
Cupertino,
85.
isn't it?
that is Cupertino. Yeah.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah, Los
that was
Altos.
85, yeah.
So basically, Los Altos is this portion. Sorry, that's as much as I could.
Yeah, no, I totally misread the 237 marker over there.
And I do want to highlight the numbers in this map in particular, or these maps, I should say. They are very much tied to number of intersections and number of segments. They're not actually highlighting their actual roadway. So the reds and the blues, those are segments and intersections that were highlighted in the primary network gaps. Does that make sense?
Okay, got it.
I just a quick, couple of quick questions. Can you go back to your timeline on the entire project? So yeah, can you go back to the project from?
I'm looking at you while I do it. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
It's gonna take a while.
So you're closing public comments on the map, online maps on the 15th, on the 16th, June 16th. But there's, I'm seeing that you have the recommendation public input map all through summer. Is this just a plan to close it early or?
Yeah, so we started recommendations about a month and a half ago. It's us developing the recommendations and really putting it all together, because after we close the public inputs, we still have to go back and discuss it with the county and say, hey, these recommendations we're including or we're taking out. And this is how we're going to prioritize. So as part of that recommendations portion of the plan, we still have to go through a level of analysis that basically tells us, all right, these are all the projects, where should they land in terms of implementation? Are they priority projects that we can implement right now? Are there priority projects that are going to cost a ton of money? So where can we get them in terms of implementation? So basically we'll be done with all of the analysis by the end of the summer, whereas we hope to have a full document that you can see, draft document.
Can you give a general idea of what the response from the Los Altos segment was so far on the maps? Do you have an idea?
In the north, no, the true answer is no. It's at the aggregate that we've been seeing in the northern parts. So it's really focusing on the expressways and the intersections at expressways. And so today I more or less checked that. My staff checked a little bit. We were really noticing a lot of comments along the expressway.
What can we do to increase that response rate?
Talk to your neighbors, please. Send it out to, what is it, next door? We still have a lot of time. Again, what having the public add their comment doesn't mean that a project's gonna completely be there, but at least if we can show the county, hey, there's a huge support for this, we can put it up in that sense. I should talk to you about kind of how we're going to be recommending the prioritization of projects. Prioritization is going to be based on cost, safety, community input, and I would in layman's terms. So if we see a project that's really being, yes, please go for it. We probably will be awarding some additional points to the project. Again, it doesn't mean that it's going to be at the top of the list, but it means that it'll at least be highlighted for the county.
Okay, thank you. That's it for our questions.
I got one.
Okay, make it real quick, yeah.
On getting the message out, there's a weekly message or email sent out by the manager or the city manager. Maybe we can include it in there.
We can get the maybe the comment section. Public comments.
Is there anyone in person who would like to make a comment on this item? Or anyone on Zoom who would like to make a comment on this item?
Hello, can I make a comment?
Go ahead.
2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Alam. Thanks for letting me speak. And thanks for the great presentation about the proposed improvements here. I'd like to point out, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'd like to point out, just think about it. This euphemism used for these slip lanes. These are basically on-ramps onto the expressway. So these were copied from what you've always had on freeways, which are the merge lanes that are very safe for you to, or for us to drive onto the freeway and merge into traffic. And these were copied onto our expressways here in the neighborhood to try and serve the same thing of speeding into traffic and making it safe to merge in. What it doesn't work with is when you as a pedestrian or kids are trying to cross these on-ramps onto the expressway on foot or on bike and are totally exposed to a driver like me trying to use these on-ramps that you call slip lanes. And what I need to do is to look left and look at the oncoming, fast-coming traffic and try and speed up and merge into the traffic. There's a little crosswalk painted into the middle of the on-ramp that has me do the exact opposite, look right and left and stop on the spot while I'm speeding to let a kid cross the street. So by definition, these are unfair towards the kids, towards the drivers, and it's just disaster to put these slip lanes in our neighborhoods. As a result, what happens is that we just avoid walking. I can give you examples for examples from our city. Of course, you said that the county is huge, so I'm sure you're not familiar with that, each and every example here of recommended slip lane removal, but one for the local residents, say in South Los Altos, one example would be Vineyard. If you're trying to walk on the left side towards Foothill in South Los Altos to get to the shopping center or to Lucky's, you walk on the left side and then you're faced with that slip lane where the driver has no visibility towards you. You cannot see the oncoming cars, and you have to just bet on your life to cross that slip lane. It just doesn't work. There's no room for this in our community.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else on Zoom who would like to make a comment? I'm not seeing anyone else.
Okay, thank you, Marisa. Bring it back to the commission for final comments. If you can have a quick set of comments, I'm pretty sure we can send you comments by email, so on as well. So if there are any final comments before we go to the next agenda item. Yes, go ahead.
3 comments. Comment 1, the loop up on Loyola, that's in the unincorporated area. you only have one ingress, egress in that loop. I would recommend you take a look at two others, connect back to somebody else so that you have a full network. There's a short little segment there. Look at that. Also look at where we have a access gate on the corner there that people use to access that part. So I would recommend you add that to the network so that it's more connected rather than a lollipop. It's more of a starfish. I will add that to your map online. Slip lane removal of Edith and Foothill Expressway, that has been a contentious intersection. I'm sure you've had many discussions with Marissa about that. That is part of the route to school, getting children to Santa Rita and to Egan. Suggest you take a second look at that intersection. Going back to the Loyola, that is also a route to school for kids to Mountain View High School, Walk, and Loyola. So looking at how to improve that. And then finally, I just want to say, I'm so thrilled to see the Foothill Expressway finally addressed after 30 years living here. Is it designate? Is it delineate? Am I allowed here? Am I not? So I'm really thrilled to see that hopefully finally coming to a distinct conclusion on whether bikes are permitted or not on the expressway. Those are my comments. You'll find more of mine online on your survey.
Yeah, I also have a comment. So my name is Amlan. I live in South Los Altos. Can you hear me?
Sorry, are you a member of the public wanting to make a comment?
Yeah, this is about the, so this is on the grant. So kids.
1 minute.
One minute.
Hold on, please. Hold on, please.
Sorry, can you hold on 1 second?
Okay.
This is about, you know, if this is about this specific topic or not.
So did you want to comment on this particular topic? The
Yeah,
countywide.
on the, yeah, this is
Okay,
the,
I'm going to allow a 2-minute comment. So you have 2 minutes to make your comment.
yeah, this is the route to school. I actually also left comment on the interactive map. This is about kids, when they are going on grant and when they are just crossing the Homestead Road to get to near the gas station to go to Homestead and CMS. That part is very, very risky because there are it's like there are 4 different directions cars can come from. There is no traffic light that gives kids a clear direction whether they can go or not. There have been many near misses in that junction. So I just wanted to say that we need to kind of look at how can we make it more safe by maybe putting explicit traffic lights or something. I also left the comment online if you want to look at it at some point.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the comments. Get back to the commission for questions. Sorry, final comments. Thompson, do you have any more?
Nothing more, it's just a really great presentation, so thank you.
Thank you.
I was just gonna, I don't know if it was called out in your research or analysis previously, but I think a lot of the cities have safe routes to school, and that's a great resource to see how the cities are planning to make those connections. Help that add to your maps.
We're working on you guys.
Are you-
Safe routes. We're working with you guys on safe
Yeah.
routes, right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both of you for coming in today and your presentation was great. Looking forward to the progress and coming back to us when we have initial plans.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to explain?
Nice to meet you.
All right, I'm gonna wait till Chair joins us before we get to the next item.
Everybody have a good one.
Thank you. Sorry.
Welcome back. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I had a good time over there. I brought some treats for after the meeting. So we're moving on to item number 3, the draft transportation CIP budget. This is an update item. And once Mr. Sandoval is ready, because I know he's got to log into his presentation, we will have him present this item to us.
Will we be getting a copy of the presentation in our packet, Garrison?
Yes, we can.
It's, yeah, I'll have to PDF it. Because it's a 66 megabyte self-touch.
Please PDF it. I have no interest in it.
I won't even get out my inbox.
No, thank you.
My outbox, but, well, thanks for having me, Jim Sandoval, Public Works Director. And, yeah, I'm gonna just review the proposed transportation CIP budget. Let's see here. So, this is. So this is the entire Public Works CIP budget, but I'm just gonna focus obviously on the transportation side of things. I'm gonna start here with the outside funding sources that we're proposing or anticipating for the next fiscal year, 23-24. The general fund, we had to severely reduce it to kind of balance. We had to severely reduce the general fund to balance the budget. So there were a number of cuts I had to make throughout Public Works, as did other departments, to kind of get the general fund in the black. So we're actually only expending about 700,000 general funds for transportation projects. We're anticipating from all the development going on about 950,000 in transportation impact fees this coming year. The rest of it is about $3.7 million in outside. So we're doing well there, and it's really kind of saving us from a transportation standpoint. So about 900,000 with gas tax, which is an annual fund that we receive, goes up a little bit every year. SB1, the statewide money that we get for transportation maintenance and safety projects. So this year we're anticipating about 783,000. The VTA Measure B for local street and road maintenance, about 675,000. Around 25,000 for Measure B Bike and Ped Education Encouragement Program. Out of VRF funds, we're anticipating $180,000. TDA Article 3, this is an MTC grant, it's a small grant of 25,000. And then thanks to Marissa's grant application for San Antonio Road, we're actually getting like 7.3 million, but the first year for design, about 1.1 million of that will be spent. And you'll see those details in a bit as I get into projects. So yeah, all in all, the transportation CIP budget is 5,300,000 and change. Outside funding is about 3.7 million. Happy to share these slides through Marissa after the meeting. So now I'll just go over each individual project, and bear with me, I might have to adjust size on each screen here. Can you all see this okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the long-awaited First Street streetscape design. And this covers this First Street area between Main Street and San Antonio Road. The idea is to kind of progress what was already done on the other portion of First Street for this corridor, which, you know, we're behind the 8 ball on this already because there have been a number of developments that have started and have even, you know, designed their sidewalk and frontages already. But the whole idea of this is to provide guidelines for developers and how they develop their frontage. And, you know, so that they're putting together a conceptual plan that, you know, would include all of the things that we all want for a complete street, not to mention, you know, parking and, you know, landscaping and, you know, street furniture and pocket parks and, you know, all those things. So we've hired a company. They did the first phase, which we all kind of worked together on how we wanted to scope this. And then now we're getting close to just getting their contract approved for putting together the plan. So the total budget for this is $338,000, and we plan to use vehicle registration fees for that. VRF fees for that project. That was originally a community development project, but Public Works is now the owner of that project. The next project is street resurfacing. And this is a multi-pronged CIP because we have one budget for, you know, overlay work, resurfacing with asphalt. We have another one for slurry sealing. We actually do micro surfacing, which has a little more aggregate in it. And then there's you know, that council committed to 3.5 million per year to get to our PCI of 75 by 26 by year 26. And so we're actually doing super well at that. Did Nafis already present that? Okay, I don't want to steal her thunder, but we're ahead of schedule. So so we're doing extremely well. We just got the study and so for the resurfacing portion, so each one of these cut sheets shows the 5-year CIP. And as you can see for asphalt overlays, this upcoming year, we're not putting any CIP money towards that. We're committed to a maintenance of effort. So with these Measure B and SB1 funds, we have to match a certain amount. I think it's 1.9 million a year. Don't quote me on that, but it's right around there. We're not using it this year so much on hiring a contractor to pave roads, but we can also use staff time and our streets department budget to meet that maintenance of effort. So that's kind of the plan this year. And I feel a little more comfortable with that this year just because of how good we're doing with the PCI. And then, yeah, we got gas tax, Measure B, SB1 that all plays into this. The next project is the annual street striping. So this is kind of a two-pronged project where, you know, when we resurface a road, we gotta like grind off all the existing striping and then replace it. And then it is also used for adding complete street elements, you know, bike lanes, and so forth. So this year we're at 250 for that budget. ERF funds and gas tax. The other big element, as I mentioned, is slurry seal, in our case, micro sealing. We're usually more like this 24-25 budget of 1.15 million. Again, this year we We kept the gas tax the same. We only had so many VRF funds to go around and we reduced our general fund amount. So this year we reduced it to 750. Overall, that all resurfacing work sums up to about 2.6 million instead of the 3.5. And if I didn't explain this, but each of these cut sheets, we've got kind of you know, the different portions of the project, project admin, design, construction, and then other costs such as inspection, testing, things. So
Why is that such a drop off on the vehicle registration fees from this year to the next fiscal year? 4,000.
we had some bank VRF funds this year that we haven't used yet, so this was a good place to plug that in. Plug that in. But our normal allocation is about 1. Annual concrete repair, reduced this one slightly this year. This is from traffic impact fee. I had 950,000. Well, thought I had $1 million. I was just told it's 950 of estimated transportation impact fees. So that's what we're using for this, and it's typically this concrete portion is for like this year we did the St. Joseph Sidewalk Gap project, and we combined that with the resurfacing project for economies of scale. So it would be for projects like that where we might have sidewalk needs in the midst of our resurfacing job as well. It also could be used, for any kind of ADA ramps that are needed. We have an ADA budget, but you'll see in a minute it's a little slimmer this year. So we kind of mix and match those two budgets. Just my mouse again. There it is. Annual traffic sign replacement. So this is something we've needed, and we're kind of trying to get back caught up on this. But basically, this year I got capacity for about 100 grand. This is to replace signs that have kind of weathered, worn out, and then maybe adding new signage if Maurice is adding some bike lanes or complete streets improvements on any of the roads where we're resurfacing. Sometimes they require signage to support those efforts. And then we also need to do a kind of an inventory and a condition assessment of our street signage around town. So similar to a PCI thing, I think we kind of need to get up to speed on which, like a sign replacement program over time. This is the annual ADA. This year again, just because I'm trying to spread all the money around, I've got 30,000 allocated, and then have it growing a little bit over the next couple of years each year. And again, if there's a greater need than 30 grand, we've got that concrete budget to help with that. Alley resurfacing, we have traditionally funded about 50 grand a year for that, but can't buy much for 50. So we tend to do it every 2 years. So at least have 100, and maybe we can do 1 or 2 alleys per year. It's kind of something that needs to happen. It's not a priority, unless it's like a super dangerous situation. But compared to all the road work, it's not a priority. It's a priority because it's in our budget, but it's something we chip away at. This upcoming year is one of the off years, and then next year's resurfacing budget, the following year's resurfacing budget should be 100,000 to it. As it turns out, this past year we the alleys we selected, the bids came in a little higher than 100,000, so, we had to kind of brought Peter to pay Paul a little bit from some of the other resurfacing funds, but it all kind of worked out in the
Choice of words, DK.
end.
I said a good choice of words there, DK.
Carmel Terrace sidewalk gap closure. This, we pushed off design to 24-25. I know this has been in our CIP for quite some time. It actually didn't rank very high in the CSMP, so it's still on our radar. I know staff and council committed to this several years ago, so that, it's still there. We'll see, what council feels about it, putting it off another year, but we're estimating 150 for design and 250 the following year for construction. That may not be enough, but that's and that's right now CIP. Ditto for University Avenue and Milverton sidewalk gap. I know this has been also on our list for a number of years. It's not a safe route to school. So I think since the CSMP, I know there have been other excuses in the past as why this wasn't done sooner. Now we have the CSMP, which has higher priorities in terms of safe routes to school. So again, proposing to push this out a little bit. Fremont Avenue Ped Bridge rehab. Nafis is almost ready to put this out to bid. This, you may recall, the Ped Bridge is, it's old, it's weathered, and we've had some areas in the wood structure that have rotted, and so it's got a temporary fix right now, but we need to kind of do a permanent fix. And as our structural engineer, reviewed the site, we also found some issues with one of the concrete footings. That it's not a huge structural issue. It's more of concrete just kind of falling off the footing that needs to be kind of fixed to address any kind of corrosion could happen. So anyway, wrapping up that design this year, and then we'll put it out to bid in this upcoming fiscal year. The in-road light system maintenance, Maurice's team has that ready to bid, and looking at about 445,000 of traffic impact fees, and the rest would be CIP, about a $600,000 budget. Well, but for construction, about 580,000. And I don't know if this has been presented to y'all yet, but the design plan is to use rapid flashing beacons, which is kind of the latest and greatest technology for those in pavement lightings. I mean, they have been in 3 cities where they've just been discontinued because they stopped working, and then the maintenance is just really challenging. Parts, and they're expensive because you gotta pull them out of the pavement, then fix the pavement, and it's time. Intersection access barrier removal. This has been a kind of a general CIP over the years that addresses basically access issues, ADA issues. And this year we're focusing it on Hetchy, which I know we've been talking about that trail forever. It literally has been a challenge to get a permit from the SFPUC. I won't go into why it's complicated, but Nafisa is getting us really close. And so we are getting ready to bid it out. We're using the remainder of our TDA Article 3 funds on that. We may not need all 129,000. That might be allocated to something else if we don't. Because we're talking mostly, creating just ramps at 1, 2, 3 spots along the trail, and some street furniture, whatnot to kind of, or some striping and whatnot to make that a safer path and more accessible. Foothill Expressway widening from Homestead Road to 280. So this is a VTA project, and I know they're kind of still looking for money to fund this. We had talked several years ago about some kind of match, and so we've had this placeholder of 250,000 there for a couple of years now. So just it doesn't look like they're going to be ready this year upcoming. So I've just got it in 24, 25. And then we've got the San Antonio Road Complete Streets project. Yeah, this is that wonderful grant that we got from the MTC. $7.3 million grant, and so we're committed to matching certain amount, which is 1.8. Thank you. Yeah, to add up several little areas here, but yeah, so our match is 1.8 million overall, and for this upcoming year is the design year, so our match is 280 for design, and expecting about 1.1 from them for design, and then the following year is when we'll do construction. So we have a great budget for this project. Should be pretty exciting to see what we get. And that was the #1 recommendation, I think, in the CSMP.
Yeah, #1 bicycle recommendation.
Okay. So from these storms, we discovered that, gosh, some of these outages can be longer than anybody ever thought. So everyone was like, "Hey, do we have batteries on our traffic signals?" And no,
We don't.
I think the one we do, it lasts a couple hours, but and so we're, programming a project to do this. Unfortunately, we couldn't make it work this year, so it's recommended for next year. Council might have a different take on it because one of those outages was during their council meeting. That was interesting. But anyway, I think there is a priority for this. It's really not practical to install a battery system that'll last 3 or 4 days, but it'll at least make it safe for several hours, to the point where if it is a long outage, we have time to get, stop signs out on A-frames like we did this year. And then this also includes upgrading the video detection at every traffic signal, which we need to. It's time. Let's see. Cristo Rey. So sometime during COVID, a car hit the guardrail. You're going from Rancho San Antonio to Foothill, and so it needs to be repaired. We have somebody designing it now. I think it's almost ready to go out to bid, and so we've got 200. This is coming out of the general fund. Hopefully we can do with that money, because it happens to be like right at the edge of a steep slope. So it's going to have some deeper foundations. footage. And I think that's it. Answer questions.
Yeah, that's great. Let's start with questions and then I think we'll take public comments. Oh, actually, since this is the information item, let's start with public comments. And then we'll come back for our questions and discussion. So does any member of the public who's present in this room like to speak, or anyone online like to speak? You may raise your hand if you're in the Zoom app. Jill, you may go ahead. You're gonna get 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you for giving me the chance to speak today, and thanks for sharing this budget. I just had one question about the sidewalks. I'm curious if there's been a consideration to develop design guidelines for the sidewalks on all of the safe routes to school. In a lot of projects, like new construction, for example, if you're building a new home or you know, an apartment or something like that, in a lot of cities, part of the requirements are not only, you know, undergrounding your utilities, but putting in new sidewalks. And is that something that the city has considered imposing? I've seen in our neighborhood, there isn't a lot of room, and I know the standards probably couldn't be applied. You know, just one standard. There might have to be several different standards because the streets in our neighborhood are very narrow, and it's like they kind of just squeezed a sidewalk where there wasn't room for one. So I realize it might be a little bit of a challenge to come up with the standards that could be used for various streets. But it seems like the homeowners are putting in these kind of, I don't know how to say it, but they don't look right. Like the sidewalks aren't consistent. And sometimes they'll sort of like curve the curb into the driveway, cutting off part of the sidewalk. And it makes it really hard. My husband had to have some surgery in his foot, and he was on, you know, one of those knee carts for a while. And it became really obvious to us how difficult it was to actually get around on the sidewalks because of not having a standard. And so I just wondered if that was something that I know is in our budget, but could we defray some of those costs by putting it on the homeowner, like a lot of other, you know, cities do? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments from the public? No. So let's bring it back to the commission. This is a good opportunity to ask Director Sandoval your questions, and also we'll have a discussion too, your opinions, your input.
The alleys, is there a good inventory of each of the alleys and their basic state of decay? One of the things we've noticed as these new development plans come before us, the infill, a lot of them are relying on the alleyways for ingress and egress. And yet they are probably insufficient for the capacity of the building that will be servicing them. So I'm just wondering where the city is on kind of our alleyway inventory. It's weird.
Yeah, you know,
You're an anachronism.
That's-
way back.
that's a good question, which I'm surprised no one has asked recent years. I don't believe we do. I don't think the PCI report clues out. I'm sure it does. Okay. So I think, you know, given that, I think, well, since I've been here, done alley work. Definitely once, maybe twice. And so in those circumstances, we just, you know, it's kind of a combination of, you know, doing some inspections and see where it's, you know, which alleys are the worst, and also feedback we get from residents. I think it's a good idea to, you know, do some form of inventory. I wouldn't want to put it in our PCI report because it would probably bring our number way down. So, and it's not really technically a road.
It's not technically a
Yeah,
roadway,
so,
but
you know,
it is an ingress egress for these large developments. I'm
Yeah.
concerned.
I think that's a good point, particularly with some of these multi-roofs. The developments going in, especially if the garage is on the alley side. Yeah, I like that.
Second is, Milverton. I've been on a EPAC or CSC for 13 years now. And I'm wondering if there's any way we can pull Milverton in, if you can put that, like, when I finally change. Can we get Milverton looked at? Just a question there. It's been around for. Those are my questions. Commissioner Ovier.
Well, I had a more general question. Thank you for this very detailed overview. Just, you started off by saying the general fund allocation is a lot lower. Where do you see most of that reduction impacting in the overall projects? Is it spread generally across all of the projects? Are there certain projects that are more deferred than others?
You know, it is spread generally. You know, most projects had a general fund funding source, and so, you know, it was kind of proportional how it was reduced. I mean, because, you know, the biggest portion was in the resurfacing CIPs. We just like removed it from there. Yeah, I mean, basically the way I did it was we had, okay, here's all the projects we have, here's all the outside funding source we have. I was told to reduce general funds funding, so I chose a number and then, played with all these funding sources we have and where they could be spent, and then realized, okay, we need to cut the general fund even more. So it was sort of a process of elimination. So all the outside funding sources were focused on projects that fit the criteria of those outside sources. And then what was left, but still a priority, we, filled those gaps with the general funds we had. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. And then second question is, does the spreadsheet, did you walk us through all the projects that are that exist, or are there a lot of other projects that just didn't make it on here?
These are all the projects that exist in the foreseeable future. I mean, there's a ton of projects in the CSMP. This list includes, what we could afford this year, based on budget and staff capacity. I didn't put a lot of focus on the other 4 years, because there's, as we come to each year, we're going to populate more projects, but the ones that I showed that were not budgeted until a future year, those were either ones we know we're going to get constant funding for, like this resurfacing, we got all this outside funding coming every year, or the projects that have been on the list for a while that get deferred. Just kind of keeping those on the radar.
One more question, Claire. I see, I don't know how much you pay attention to the future forecasts and allocations, but as things are all going up in costs, a lot of the budget has stayed relatively flat, maybe going up a little bit. Does that impact how much we're able to get done?
It's a good question. Yeah. Well, let's look at an example. So we'll take this one. Now there's a lot of funding sources. So I play it conservative. This 2.9 million, that's like, council gave us a $3.5 million goal each year. And so, yeah, inflation, is happening, but we're still kind of limited to that 3.5. However, each of the outside funding sources do have a COLA, or they increase each year. And so, but I'm showing them as constant just to be conservative for now. So. It's I would say for resurfacing, we just gotta like. Since as Nafis will show that, we're doing really well. I felt like we had some room to reduce it. Even though cost of paving is higher than it was in 2019 when the council had this goal. But it's been 3 years and we've been doing pretty good, or 4 years. So even with costs going up, so perhaps the 3.5 million was a conservative number, but that's good because it was some wiggle room and it helped us get ahead of things. So yeah, the general fund, it's hard to, each year we're kind of seeing, what are our revenues and expenses, and how much general fund capacity do we have for CIP. So anything I have in general fund in future years, it's a guess, but everything else that's outside funding, I have pretty good assurance that it is what it is.
You said both general questions. So we're talking about alleys. How many miles of alleys does the city have? Ballpark.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. We have to research that.
Okay. Because I don't have any, reason I don't have any alleyways where I might have put it. So I'm just kind of curious as to how that applies into your budget. But okay. And then you mentioned the thing, 8,000 citywide signs. Stop signs, whatever else. Is that comparable to state average for any other city of size? Is that more, a lot less? I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you have?
What was the question exactly?
Well, you said that we have 8,000 signs budgeted for, take care of. And I just wondered if that was a standard number for a city our size, or if that's a lot, or if it's twice as many or half as many.
Yeah, well,
Just curious.
I imagine that number might have been collected some years ago, so I wonder how accurate it is, especially with some of the improvements we've done in the last few years. I think that Los Altos probably has a average to below average number of signs compared to other cities with the same amount of street miles. Since we are a little bit more rural in nature, I don't think we have as many as some cities.
Don't we keep track of where they all are?
Well, not as good as we should, and that's why I mentioned that, we need to kind of do this inventory and, kind of condition tracking, so that we can get a better handle on it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple quick questions. Can you make a general comment on, talked about the reduction in the general fund across department? Can you quantify, can you make a general comment on that? What that would be like?
You mean the amount of reduction?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it broke out for transportation, but just in my overall public works budget, I think I reduced it right around 3 million.
And for the, can you, Nicole, what was it for last year for transportation? The allocation for last year?
The general fund allocation.
Like the one say was like 1.3 million, was it? This year was 900,000.
It was 7.
Last year.
No, this year,
year,
I'm proposing 700, yeah. Last year, well, I do know, let's see. We. Can't see this. It's a messy spreadsheet. So looks like. We had 1,142,000 more, in just kind of the overall resurfacing budget of general funds, than last year. In terms of, yeah, that just our overall general fund tally, I don't know specifically for traffic, I'd have to look that up.
And I guess there was some, obviously, we have significantly, I mean, we are doing quite well on the external funds for this year. Trying to get a sense for what the compromise was like, you know, did that have an effect on you reducing the general fund for? That go into your accounting for that?
Sorry, can you rephrase the question?
So I guess the question was, the allocation from general funds. Did the external funds have an effect on what that was for this year?
You're saying because we had more
Yeah.
external funding due to, for instance, the OBAG grant,
Yeah.
but did that cause a reduction in the amount of general funds going to transportation projects?
Yeah, I would say it's, it did, I mean, thankfully, we're really fortunate in transportation that we do have all these outside funds, and so this upcoming year, we're largely reliant on them. You know, I think what was it out of the, what did I say the total budget was? Yeah, so the total budget is 5.3. And then we actually, you know, this current year, we didn't have any traffic impact fee funding. We may have had a little bit, nothing worth noting. So the fact that we have about $1 million from that was huge. And actually, this, my first draft of the CIP budget that we were discussing with the exec team, this is before I knew that the TIF budget I was going to have, it was a lot skimpier than this. So that was a savior to find out that that's the projection for 23, 24.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. One other question. Can you? I didn't understand your comment on when you were talking about the street resurfacing, allocating, I guess, some of the funds for staff time and design versus the projects itself. Can you clarify that? I'm not sure I got all that.
Yeah. One of the things that the finance director wanted to do was kind of show what our estimate is for how we're going to spend money for each of these projects, how it breaks down. So one thing we haven't been doing, but the plan is for this upcoming year is to allocate our own staff time to CIPs when we work on them.
And is it new for this year?
Sorry,
Is
yeah,
it new for this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
and so not every city does that, you know, because you know, like Maurice and I were, well, Maurice is paid all out of general fund. You know, mine is spread around to different funds, but my salary, but we would yeah, this kind of will help us understand, you know, what CIPs actually cost.
And this is across all, not just transportation, I guess.
Correct. Yeah, so, and it's hard to really know because we haven't done this before, so we just put estimates in here, and you know, once we start tracking these hours on our spreadsheet, I mean, on our timesheets, then we have the better idea in the following years, like, yeah, okay. Project management, so forth is 15% or
Yeah.
10%, whatever.
That would be great. And I think getting a year-end summary on this would be awesome. That's one. Okay. And then, just a clarifying question, do you, was the traffic sign, but, the allocation for the traffic sign project was about 1 million. And then the in-road signaling for San Diego is 500. Is that inclusive or that's separate? That's it's separate. Okay. All right, I think that's all the questions I have.
Thank you.
And the 1 billion was over 5 years.
Yeah.
So it's my turn. I think the vice chair was sort of asking some of these questions, but I'll ask in a different words. So, and I know you don't have all the information, Jim, but what's your sense of proportionality in terms of the approximate percent that transportation used to receive out of the general fund versus the percent that we may be receiving this year? Like, as in, our revenues up, flat, down? And then are we up, flat, down in comparison? And at what rate?
I don't know how that rate carries into our transportation budget relative to other divisions and departments.
Yeah. Yeah. So next question. The TIF, good that that money's there. Do we know when there will be a review of the TIF in terms of the amount we're charging along with any transportation fee? Because that amount set a long time ago before inflation, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Yeah, that is. I know it's on our radar. I think. Kind of along with park and loop fees, and there's a few fees that have been. They need to be passed.
Yeah.
And TIF and park and loop. Two examples. So I believe that's supposed to happen this year.
I hope so, because that is,
Did we have that in your operations budget? Do you recall?
Hiring a consultant to.
To work on
work
TIF.
on TIF.
Yeah.
I can't remember at this moment,
Okay.
and I know it's something that's been discussed, as far as putting it in our operations budget. I don't remember the final outcome. of it either or not.
I think that will impact our future. So sometimes things that don't seem important, we can move them off, but it'll actually, the sooner that's pulled in,
Yeah.
it affects our long term in a positive way, or potentially in a positive way. Yeah. PCI, so good that we're doing good. I had seen, or I had heard, I don't know if it's factual because we'll wait for the presentation, that we were at, what was it 72, 73, something like that. Does that include the work that's just being completed now? It does.
No.
Okay. It doesn't.
There's not.
It does.
This. Yeah. Well. When was the inspection?
Inspection was in December, but they did incorporate the streets like when we microservice.
Oh, okay, they did. Okay. All right.
Okay, so that number includes where the streets that have just been done. And 72? 74, so 74. So now with street maintenance, do we have a sense of what amount we need? Are we just then, as council set the goal 75 by 2026 a few years ago? We don't know what council's goal is thereafter, right? But just assume for a minute, it's maintain 75. Are we budgeted so we maintain 70 to maintain or go above 75? Because I think many of the jurisdictions around us are higher. So we're budgeted such that we maintain it or keep trending up.
Well.
What's that?
This year. 900 under what we know. So there's a good chunk that 3.5 that isn't actually paving the road. It's like, mobilization costs and overhead costs for, contractors when they move in. There's a lot of work that goes into contractor moving into town and paving our roads that isn't actually paving our roads, you know what I mean? And so, I think your report estimated that the actual paving work is what, around 2.6 million or something like that?
Yes.
And so, this year I've got 2.6 million in the total budget. So, really, it's the actual paving work is less. It's all that extra.
Yeah.
Soft cost. So, in a perfect world, I wouldn't want to reduce it, but it was kind of what we needed to do.
Yeah. But reduce the budget, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot, not just paving, but there were a lot of projects I didn't want to
Yeah,
reduce, but
of
you know,
course.
it's sort of a.
Of course. And in a perfect world, we probably want to keep trending up in our PCI as much. But nevertheless, you took on that council goal and you've done a good job.
We're just about there 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So now one more area to ask questions, or maybe two more things to ask, but the council goal focus now is implementation of the CSMP. I don't know the exact words, but that's the goal. So when I look at this budget, oh, there's San Antonio in there. I don't see a lot of stuff from the CSMP.
We did a lot this year. We are resurfacing, we prior to graded paving, do our resurfacing work. And as I mentioned, our normal budget for that portion of work is 3.5 million. Our budget for O'Grady's contract is 6 million plus 900 contingency. So, and we're looking to spend most of that 900, if not all, because as, for instance, the Hardin student drop off and bike lane, cycle track, and all the improvements on Hardin, we had as an add alternate bid item. Since Marisa had kind of did a pilot out there with temporary striping to see if it was going to work. It looked like it was working well. So then with contingency money, we went ahead and went for that add-all. Because we had recommended the council not to approve that portion of it. But turns out it's working, and so we funded that. So but there was a lot of work around schools, of course, St. Joseph sidewalk gap. So we hit a lot of the priorities in CSMP. I think a pretty robust amount this year. Next year, well, the focus is San Antonio Road. That's the #1 project. It's a hefty amount of money. Thankfully, we have a lot of grant money to make it happen, and we need to kind of keep pursuing those opportunities. And then, portions of the concrete budget, striping budget, we'll use portions of those to add extra bike lanes here, crosswalks there, and that type of thing.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that the Safe Routes to School, that's phase 1, which was focused on striping and designing. You guys have done a lot of work with that. I know when we talked budget or CSMP last time, there was the notion of trying to do the Safe Routes to School phase 2 in more infrastructure. And then perhaps the parts of the city where we didn't get the striping and signing. Is that not moving into the CIP? The Safe Routes, there was a Safe Routes to School plan. There was a phase one, which I think was
Improvement plans.
done
Yeah.
this year, and then there was a phase two. Is that in the CIP? Is that not moving into the CIP? Is that on hold? Is that because of the budget?
Phase two is what we talked about a number of times, like this supposed to be kind of concrete improvements, some sidewalk gap closures, some curb extensions, and then a few additional RFPs.
And then I think there was still some places where we didn't do the striping.
Okay. So, yeah, we've got the RFB project, which will cover not just the old ones on San Antonio Road, but a number of others. What's the total number of crosswalk, like 18 or something?
20, there's some adults for some additional ones right now. The base bid is just replacing all the existing flashing crosswalk hardware. So the base bid is not any additional new RFPs. We have a couple of adults in there for new RFPs. But the school routes phase two is intended to be RFPs at other locations
Okay.
near schools.
So the phase two is not yet moved into the CIP. I think that's what we're hearing.
Not specifically. So we have a little bit of capacity, you know, with our striping budget. So, I think that, you know, as put together the next resurfacing project, which is kind of in design right now, you know, we would look at those streets that need resurfacing and, you know, try to integrate any CSMP improvements. So that's still sort of being defined, and, you know, we would use the money we have to fund those, I guess is what, so.
Yeah.
It's hard, we don't have it down to where like, okay, yeah, these improvements and we know how much they're gonna cost, and we got it in budget right now, I kind of the budget is wagging the dog.
Yeah, and I think, like Commissioner Ambiel, I haven't been around as long as she is, but Milverton has been around since as long as I have been here. So at that point in time, projects were put in the CIP early and placeholdered and flagged. And now that we have the CSMP, where we have a prioritization of projects, even if we don't fund them this year or next year, should we be putting them into the budget where we're starting to plan them out into future years?
Yes, and you know, given the number of projects, the amount of resources, you know, we focused, I mean, the big projects here are San Antonio Road and resurfacing, you know, and so and then a number of just projects that are safety projects or ADA projects that need to have, you know, Hatch, the pedestrian bridge, the RFBs, I mean, and all these things just, they too have been, you know, in need for a number of years. So it's we're kind of responding to maintenance needs, really. I think the crosswalks are maintenance needs, the bridge is maintenance needs, the church is a ADA issue. There's probably a few updated, but
Yeah. And my final question, just briefly, as long as I don't take us off track. This has been focused a lot on the CIP for transportation. What about some of the other transportation in terms of programming, like the Safe Routes to School program that Andrian is running, for example, or the bike education stuff that I think is done in the police department? Are those maintaining at kind of current level or with inflation, or are we going up or down?
yeah, we are maintaining, actually, I think originally Adriana's budget was 60,000. I think right now we're at 72. Yeah, so programmatically, we've got, you know, our professional services took a bit of a hit in our operations, but, you know, more kind of on-call stuff, but we have enough, you know, to, I think, be okay. In terms of, you know, the key programs that education, and then some of the traffic data, that we're collecting and, the modeling. We've got all of those budgeted as they're needed, you know, to the extent that they're needed. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for taking all these. I know we're asking important but challenging questions, so thank you for taking them. Does anyone else have any questions? And then after we close the questions, if anyone wants to do comments, that's also welcome. The comments were also
I
buried in our questions.
I don't know,
too.
suggestion, comments, question, just to follow up on chairs. Basic suggestion, how do we move forward on the CSMP in terms of budgeting going forward? It's kind of a catch-22, obviously. We want to put these projects in the budgets. We know we don't have the money to implement all parts of CSMP. The question is, how do we know which project we're going to prioritize and which ones we're going to go get grants for? So it seems like, you know, somehow having, I don't know if it's budget or some other plan that says, okay, here's how we want to spread it out, and these are the projects we want to go out for grants and prioritize them. That's a question. I think so that's kind of a conundrum. So how do we make that happen?
Yeah.
It's a process. You know, we had a process for doing this by work plan, a 5-year work plan for the commission. Obviously, it's not, we're not reconciling. The question is, how do we do that? Yeah. And then how do we identify which ones we want to go for grants?
That's a great question. I think, you know, the honest answer right now is, you know, we haven't planned that out because, you know, I have half a team, staff resources wise. And so right now I've been focused on like this year and next year, and you know, how much funding do we have and how many resources do we have to carry this out? Definitely what you're saying is needed, you know, coming up with a plan for each of these, and we know at least the outside funding sources we have now, we know that most of those are going to continue, and so you know, some of those we can use towards CSMP priorities. But I think the answer to Stacy's last question was, you know, all of the outside funding sources we have right now are focused heavily on resurfacing and, you know, some of these deferred maintenance CIPs that just need to happen for safety reasons or ADA reasons. And I think, yes, we do need to get to a point where we're forecasting, you know, how we can.
Yeah, thank you for recognizing that. Yeah, there's a way the commission can help. Yeah, something that we should think about.
And I know I promised that I was done with all my questions, but you said something, Jim, that made me think of something else. So you said have a team. So what about the budgeting and the plans for those, for the, you know, for the positions that have been open or?
Yeah, so the in engineering, okay, so let's just in transportation, Yaku's position, it's not built this year for budget reasons, and so it's now about to be advertised, so we should hopefully get it filled this summer. So then Marisa would have a full team. The other impact is our mid-level engineers all work counter duty, which is, you know, basically issuing permits for general public works, not just transportation. So The fee serves on that. You know, Godfrey's replacement will do the same thing. But since I've, you know, in our development engineering, I'm missing 2 engineers vacancies, have another vacancy in kind of our CIP group. And so there's been a lot more work that the fees decide to do on counter duty, which takes away from transportation projects. And so this year we lost our executive assistant. So I'm changing that position to a counter engineer, full-time counter engineer to help offset a lot of the counter work that our FDs and others do and take them away from that work. You know, we have to do a little more, everyone's got to do a little more admin work, and we're gonna throw some of the admin work to the maintenance admin that they're process of interviewing people for. So that'll help the situation. In plumbing engineering, we gave up an engineer there so Marisa could get one, and we're going to farm out a portion of our plan to consulting, and we're going to have a new fee to pay for that consultant. So that'll at least cover that portion of work. Yeah, it's
A lot of puzzle pieces.
yeah. So I wasn't able, you know, I've got a position that was approved a few years ago that has never made it into the budget, another engineering position that I need. But at least doing that, hey, fills a need, and gave Marisa an engineer, and
Yeah, thanks for the update on
sure.
staffing. Anyone else? I don't have questions or comments. Yeah, you can go ahead. Yes.
5 comments. 1, don't lose sight of phase 2 of CSMP. It's really easy to let that cream get shelved and forget about it. So we need some sort of trigger that says, time to go and dust that off and look at what we're gonna do next. 2, yay batteries. That was a nightmare. Yay batteries, yay backup power supplies, and yay, I think the city needs an ordinance on how long homeowners can run their generators outside. They shouldn't have to run them after 10 o'clock at night. It's way too noisy. So another item. 3, Milverton, please. If loose change comes up, if something comes in under budget, scuttle it away, see if we can get at least some design on Milverton, make some progress. They've been asking for a very, very long time. Take a look at those alleyways. I think they're a valuable asset, especially as downtown gets more and more developed. We should look at those, at how we can make use of that asset, because we're not going to grow more land. So are we doing the best we can with those alleyways? Should they be made one way? Should they be improved? How can we make the most of that precious resource that we're not going to get more, which is streets? And then finally, number 5, great socks, Jim.
We all have to need over now.
Yeah.
Next. So anyone else with comments?
I noticed the socks too.
So
It's a nice counterpoint to gray suit with Hawaiian socks. It's good. So I like it.
Any other comments? No. I think my comments were largely buried in my questions, which is definitely CSMP is the priority, and as Commissioner Ambiel said, let's not lose sight of it, and actually let's try to proactively start budgeting it out. I think looking at some sort of funding review in terms of how we fit in the overall, you know, what's the revenue, what's the cost, what's the public works need, what's the proportion of the budget that's coming. And then PCI, I think you've done very well. I think it's good for us to keep making progress on PCI, because the second you take your eye off that ball, you're going down. And many of our neighboring cities are even at our 74 are higher than us. So I think reviewing the TIF and any transportation fees like this other fee you just talked about, this is critical for our future. We will not get our CSMP priorities done if we're not bringing these fees in. And I think any opportunity, I know we get some set fees with the gas tax and some of the local roads and other things, but the more opportunity we can take to bring in more grant money. Marisa, you did fantastic work bringing in grants to the city. I think that that's important for us as well. And I'm pleased to hear that we're going to continue. I recognize that we may not be able to expand unless we suddenly had an outside donor who just handed us a bunch of money for the Safe Routes to School program, for example, but at least we're holding that. And I think that that's important for our city to do. Hopefully there will be more optimistic happenings next year, and I know you don't control the council priorities, but funding of their priorities, because CSMP is their priority. Well, that's all I have to say on this item. So I think we can move on to the next item, but maybe first, do we want a 5-minute break? So let's take a 5-minute break. And it's now 8:19, so let's come back at 8:25 and we'll talk about item. Okay, it looks like, are we ready to start? Yep, we're ready to come back to our meeting. We're moving to item number 4, that objective transportation standards. I'm gonna turn it over to our staff liaison.
Thank you. My name is Marisa. I am the transportation manager for the city, and I'll be giving a presentation on the objective transportation standards. This is the product process that is being done by the city, and I'll describe more about the background in a minute, but this is kind of considered the kickoff presentation on this topic. Our agenda for this item, I'll give some background and context. I'll give a little bit of review of the housing law presentation done by the city attorney at our Complete Streets Commission meeting last April. I'll bring up some things to kind of keep in mind throughout this process, which will span a few months. And then I will share the list of potential topics for objective standard that have been developed so far, and get your input on those. And then we'll talk about next steps. So going to give some context. I think a good way to start with a lot of these topics that we discussed at CSC is, why is this happening? And so in this situation, state housing law is kind of answer number 1. So I have some information here. On the left, on the right, I have a screenshot from the state housing website about the statewide housing plan. So the state of California has stated that the availability of decent and suitable housing for every California family is a priority of the highest order. And this is becoming more and more urgent in recent years because communities across the state, including Los Altos, are struggling to meet the housing needs of all of their residents. State housing element law, which was established in 1969, recognizes the vital role that local governments play in supply and affordability of housing. And it requires all cities and counties in California to establish a long-range plan to meet their fair share of regional housing needs. And cities are charged with planning for the welfare of their citizens, including ensuring that the existing and projected demands for housing are adequately met. This is a quote from the statewide housing assessment: high housing costs and related housing instability issues increase healthcare costs for individuals, decrease educational outcomes, and make it difficult for California businesses to attract and retain employees. So that's some information on the background as it relates to state housing law. As a result of these state housing laws, Los Altos has recently completed and adopted their 6th cycle housing element, and that is in effect from 2023 to 2031. And this is in compliance with current state housing law. So the housing element is the primary tool used by the state to ensure that local governments are appropriately planning for and accommodating enough housing across all income levels. And the housing element is a mandatory part of a city's general plan. The housing element has to be reviewed and certified by the California Department of Housing and Community Development to ensure compliance with statutory requirements. If you go onto the HCD website, there are a number of instances and articles posted of cities that have recently been in violation of state housing law and some of the implications of that, which is what we would like to avoid. Certification also ensures that the city remains eligible for various state and federal funding services. For example, our grant application is contingent upon some housing requirements and compliance with current state housing law. So this is a snapshot from the Los Altos Housing Element website. And there's a lot more information there. The housing element was adopted by City Council in January of this year. And the link is here at the bottom left of the slide if you want to take a look and get a little bit more information or get the link to the full plan for more background and context. So the part of the housing element that pertains to us is program 3K, which requires the standardization of multimodal transportation requirements. And this requires streamlining a development review process for multifamily housing projects by the adoption of development standards for multimodal transportation. So this means that the CSU will no longer be reviewing individual development applications. So the meetings that we used to have in conjunction with the Planning Commission, where we would review development applications, won't be happening anymore. And instead we'll have some objective transportation standards that will be used to evaluate and approve development projects. So streamlining the process. Any standards that are completed by December of 2023 will be integrated into the zoning code and enforced as a part of the zoning code. And objective standards can be added or edited at any future time. So these are a couple of the key slides from the city attorney's presentation to the commission in April of 2022. This was his cover slide. And then he talked about objective standards and what defines objective. So a major emphasis of new housing laws is on objective standards. And objective means involving no personal or subjective judgment by a public official, being uniformly verifiable by reference to an external and uniform benchmark or criterion, available and knowable by both the development applicant or proponent and public official. Something to keep in mind when we're developing ours. And the other major thing that he covered in that presentation was nexus. And this defines what nexus means. So this is a crucial part of developing our objective standards. So does this condition relate to some burden project you may have on the community? On the other side of that is proportionality. So a nexus alone is not enough. The ask also has to be proportional to the proposed project's anticipated impact. So some things to keep in mind as we move forward in this process. Nexus and proportionality are essential to compliance with state law. And the Transportation Division has met with the Community Development Department and the city attorney to establish kind of a working list of topics that are compliant, and also to kind of get a sense of the constraints of what we can develop as part of our standards. As part of that conversation, the main thing that came out so far was that the objective standards are to be developed for the building and the building frontage only, and that any offsite improvements would be outside the nexus and proportionality. As a result of that meeting, another kind of key point that came out was that best practice for developing objective standards is to use evidence-based, reputable, and published standards wherever possible. So we aren't going to be reinventing the wheel. We want to be pointing to external sources that are previously published. And then another thing to keep in mind is the objective standards can be added to or edited at any time. So this doesn't need to be an exhaustive process. We don't need to put too much pressure on ourselves for them to be perfect or 100% complete. And I know that when the community development director presented the bike parking standards, he kind of encouraged us to think of this as a low-hanging fruit item. And so I think as part of this process moving forward, we want to think about low hanging fruit, things that are easy to implement, and also things that will have a big impact without digging too much into perfection. So like I just mentioned, the bicycle parking and storage objective standards have already been finalized and adopted after joint review by the CSC and the Planning Commission. That happened a couple of months ago. And then to kick off the rest of the process, I had the meeting that we mentioned with the Community Development Department and the legal team. And we fleshed out kind of like a list of potential topics moving forward. And so this was based on a few things. One was a review of previous CSC development review meetings and what questions were asked by the CSC during those meetings. And then another was the development questionnaire, which was developed in a very similar way. So a list of the kind of commonly asked questions by the CSC to developers who came to the review meetings. And then input from the legal team on nexus and proportionality, and then collaboration with the planning division. So this is a list of potential topics that we came up with. And I've kind of broken them down into 4 main categories. So that's what you'll see here. The first is building frontage. So this can pertain to loading zone length, curb management, pedestrian scale lighting, curb cuts. And then next we'll have access to the site. So that can include garage access, access for recycling, compost, and garbage, emergency vehicle access, and pedestrian and bicycle access to the building and to the site. Driveway, vehicle ingress and egress. So site distance for the driveway exits. And I know in the past we talked about audio visual signs for cars exiting the driveway. So that's something that we've included in the potential list. And standards for the garage, including lifts, lighting, and pedestrian access to the garage. Some things that were on the list of frequently asked questions. We were advised by the legal team to cover the standard details instead of objective standards. So 2 of those items are listed here. One was bus shelters that would be done in collaboration with BTA. And another was sidewalk design and widths. And then some other things that were frequently asked are covered by other standards that would supersede our standards anyway, or they're already existing and in place. And so therefore we will not be developing objective standards for these. And those include elevator size, that's covered by the California ADA requirements and state fire and life safety laws. Here are the required dimensions based on those requirements. And then garbage pickup procedures, our legal team thought that would be best covered by mission trails, and red curbing will likely be deferred to county fire. So we have some next steps. For one, I think precedent studies are going to be really important in this process. So I'm going to be doing those myself. And we are also encouraging the commissioners to conduct your own kind of precedent research. I think this will be really helpful to have a sense of what's being done in other cities to inform your review and your comments. And the way that I like to do precedent studies for various things related to transportation is kind of outlined at the bottom of the slide. So I think that some of the bigger cities are good precedents to look at for best practice and kind of cutting edge information. So San Francisco, Sacramento, and Oakland. I know Sacramento just completed their housing element recently too. And then cities that are similar to Los Altos in terms of size and scale are good precedents for that kind of more detailed, scope and kind of magnitude. So the other cities. Advice from the legal team was to, what I mentioned earlier, use evidence-based and reputable published standards wherever possible. So people look out for those, and sometimes those come from other sources besides just other cities. So as far as the timeline for review, I think the best way to break this up would be to kind of discuss maybe one category in each of our upcoming meetings. So this is a preliminary timeline that I've laid out for the next few months, where we can review kind of each topic by category, and we'll have a handful of objective details under each of these categories to discuss. So I'll take commissioner questions and feedback. This is kind of what I thought would be valuable feedback. for one, just look at the list of topics and let us know what you think. If you have any additional requests as far as topics that you'd like us to consider, keeping in mind the nexus and proportionality that we discussed, we will take those and discuss them with the legal and planning team to see if we can develop some standards for those. And then if you have any comments on the timeline, feel free to provide those. And then if you have any initial ideas about, precedent research, we can discuss those. And as I kind of find good sources, I can email those out to the group as well, so that we're all kind of on the same page.
So thank you for this helpful presentation. And I just want to set the process for everyone. I think first we'll have some commissioner questions. I first want to start with, does everybody understand the process or questions on the process before we drill into the specific focus? And then we'll take another round of questions on our focus, and we'll have some public comments, and let's have our discussion. So does anybody have any questions on what's happening here? Go ahead.
So I think a general question. The information you collect from us and you formulate proposed objective standards, do you then take them to, say, the planning commission, and they can then revise them, and then, or take them to city council and they can revise them, and it doesn't come back to us? So we get one chance, you take it, and everybody says, 1.5 is too large, we're gonna make 0.5 CFI.
Very good. You're asking about the feedback loop in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah.
credits. Nick, do you have a comment on that project?
So similar to what we just did with the bicycle parking. In theory, the council could always, so I've had this happen in a jurisdiction, is because there was a recommendation of another commission. That then they wanted to rescind it back to the original recommending commission. We don't really do that here because it's not a part of our municipal code.
Right.
With that being said, you kind of outlined it like how it could go. However, the current council has the mindset that this is the commission that should be making decisions regarding transportation issues. So essentially transportation planning. I mean, that's really what this conversation is. It's more transportation planning.
Okay.
So I mean, prime example is, we your personal recommendation was 1.5 bicycle parking stalls at the last time we actually started this process, essentially. Then the planning commission recommended 1 stall. I split the difference because I'm like, this is neither here nor there one way or another. When, if they had said 0.5, then there's a little bit more of a, okay, where are we going with this? The delta was just not significant in that instance. But ultimately, the council decided in favor of the 1.5. Inevitably, the council is there to be the corrective action when commissions make a recommendation that might be a little bit singular in its view and perspective.
Thank you. I just
So
understand the process. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And one more comment on sort of the process and the timeline, as I understand it, and staff should correct me, is that the schedule that Marisa has outlined, council has given the direction that we work on these objective standards, and they want to have them adopted by the end of the calendar year, so they're effective at the beginning of January. Is that correct? I see some heads nodding from staff. So that's kind of where we're headed here. Other questions on the process?
Yeah, driver behind some of this, I mean, is it cost cutting? Was it legal, worried about lawsuits, because you talked about violations in California, the state suing other cities, is that what's driving some of this, or?
Yeah, so what's driving this is the state housing law and the streamlining process for development review as a requirement.
So that's just something that's brand new then?
no. So to give it just a little bit of a, just touch on it. So the 6 cycle planning period, which is what we're in the Bay Area, just started as of January 31st of this year. So it's the 8-year period now. the heat essentially got turned up in the oven, leading up to the 6th cycle. So if you were in, Southern California, all the jurisdictions in the last 2 years before us, they already have gone through the baking process and already felt the heat of the state. We're the last main region that ends up getting this, so it's really kind of been on its way to the destination.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the Bay Area is just the last stop for the for the state, and inevitably some of the jurisdictions, I'm surprised because of how progressive the Bay Area is, but I worked in 3 jurisdictions in Southern California during the 5th cycle and actually took 2 of them through the 6th cycle. And really, I'm pretty surprised because it's been pretty heavily in the news about what the state has been doing with Southern California jurisdictions. It's now the Bay Area's time. However, a lot of the laws have changed in regards to the enforcement capabilities. So before, you had to go through the courts. That enforcement capability has now been essentially granted almost ministerially. So now the State Department of Housing, essentially my department, but at the state level, now has the ability to essentially, like our code enforcement officer, which we made the joke around town about, prepare to be blown away with a gas leaf blower type of a situation. Well, their thing is they get to come in and decertify your housing element, which then you lose your permitting authority. So we wouldn't even be having any conversations because the state would say, CSC, you don't have purview to even talk about any type of development essentially, because they deregulate essentially what's going on in town. So, I mean, there is the carrot and the stick with this. Ultimately, to give you the Reader's Digest in 30 minutes, that's pretty much where all this is coming at. So this happens to be one of the, and I have talked about this with countless residents here in Los Altos in Southern California, my prior jurisdictions. This happens to be just one of the kind of common denominators that they have determined, and I mean the state, that this is a potential impediment to housing and to the creation of housing. The way that you create and flip that on its back and are still able to do it is you create the objective standards that are able to be equally applied to everyone, but you also then make sure that it's proportional in its application. So that's why, for example, building frontage, that's very easy to provide the nexus. There's sometimes some nexus that can be stretched when we're talking about ADA compliance, where it's not going to be in the immediate frontage of the building. But there's an ADA ramp where you can't just stop because the property line adjacent is ending. You have to then continue at the next 15 feet potentially. So there's that little bit of proportionality that ends up being a little bit different. That's going to be one of the big ones that we do want to make sure that we nip in the bud earlier, sooner rather than later. Just because, once an application comes in, it is vested at whatever is in place at that time. Yes. So if someone came in today, there's not really much for us to apply because a lot of them have been more of a discretionary application, which we can't really do any longer.
Okay.
So I'll just add to that and I'll have you guys correct me if I'm wrong. But council has adopted one of the programs of the housing element that essentially says that we don't do the development reviews anymore, with one exception, which is an all commercial.
Right, yeah, and that's because anything all commercial, that's not a part of the housing element. All the old rules apply. That's not changed. It's not probably ever going to change, to be honest.
So from the time that council adopted that, which was a few weeks back, Nick will have the exact date. Until we adopt these new standards, there is nothing in the interim. And all those projects will be reviewed by Director Zorns. We don't review them.
So
So
I thought maybe it was cost cutting because before we were working with the planning commission, we don't do that, then save some money.
No, this is all about SB8, it's about the housing block that says you have to build. How many do we have to build in our board?
1948.
1948 single family homes.
Well,
Like
units, not
20
single families.
Units by
20,948
Yeah.
unit, housing units, not bedrooms, units.
units.
or?
No, it's the projection is to build that out within an 8-year planning cycle.
And so every city was given a budget, said you have to build this many and
So
give us the
we're
plan.
getting-
Is that?
The budget is.
No.
No.
Yeah, okay.
No.
So,
However, I'm gonna touch on one thing. More units means more TIF, means more PIL, so inevitably there's potential for those things and, you know, that's, there's also potential funding for increased, you know, obviously. There's a lot of different things with the nexus of what
so
ends
some
up
of the
happening.
development that we were talking about, planning commission, does that fit into that number? Or do we have to start from scratch?
Which number?
No, it's the same number.
Same number, so, yeah, SBA, they gave us a budget of how many houses, units we have to build, 19,
Almost 2,000, yeah.
it's 2,008 years.
Okay,
And we had to submit a plan to the state, said, here's how we're gonna do it,
Correct.
and the state has to certify that.
Yep.
Well, Southwest did one of these, it didn't get certified.
Waiting for.
but when we did this joint mission with the planning commission, that was on the housing unit. It's either being built now. or-
Yes, that's part of that number,
And so.
part of that number,
If that was like, say, 100, it's gonna drop in.
right,
Okay, so it's
we're
part-
making progress, but we're not close.
Exactly.
Fair.
So the sweet spot is to be at 75% by the end of the 8 years, and then you get a little bit of grace. So that's still a lot. That's 1,500 units.
So
Most of which are affordable, deed restricted. So that's also hard to accomplish.
Well, there's a certain percentage of the houses or construction has to be low income.
Approximately 60% of that quota has to be affordable.
I didn't realize that. Anyway,
Yeah.
so it does sound like it might be somewhat easy or because we can get the experience you've had and then communities that from, you said this fifth cycle. And look at all the things they've done, so it might be helpful that we're toward the end of it.
Yeah, so what Marissa has laid out for you guys is some of the stuff. So we do have standard details for certain things. I can tell you an application of one of our existing previous headaches. There's some deficit in specific standards that we need to then just refine. Some of them, it's just refining them. You know, the bicycle parking was a great example of something that it's a well-known document that we can absolve into our code. And it's obviously regionally accepted by the VTA. So things like that, that's actually where we probably should try to extract and really then include into our code. But you know, some of it's going to be just refining it. And then some of it's going to be looking at some of our prior history of what we've been asking for during the discretionary process. Because a lot of that, and I am very surprised, honestly, that in 70 years of incorporation, there's certain things that we never just thought of including. Not to say that we can't deviate and change it, but it's like, well, we keep on asking for the same thing. We need to then just incorporate it so that we have teeth. That's what I'm trying to get at. What I've said to the community is I'm all for creating the standards because I want to give you guys the teeth, but you guys don't have the teeth. You got the bark, but you don't got the teeth. And that's the problem, is that we're with developers right now, they have the keys to the castle.
Right.
But there's a way to close off some of the rooms. And these are some of the rooms that we need to close off and keep them isolated into the playground that we're allowing them to be in. So I mean, like, that's kind of like the best analogy that I can give it, but you know, parking garage standards, that's a good one that I can work with Marissa. I don't really want to do it at a public hearing, to be quite honest, with some of the specific examples of what fails us in the process. I will also tell you is that when things are a ministerial action in by and far and large, they're not appealable. There's not a way to waive certain standards when it's an actual ministerial application. When it's discretionary application, that's then when it's the density bonus rules are totally at game and they can essentially request to modify or walk away from whatever standard we have. But when it's a ministerial application, that is not generally allowed. It's not 100% the silver bullet, but when it's a ministerial application, so like considering engineering standards, those are things that are considered a ministerial application that you can't really kind of get around. It's like the building code, you really can't get around them. So.
Okay, any other final questions on the process? I just want to make sure everybody understands the process before we dive. Yeah.
Do you envision scenarios where there are exceptions that will have to come to a commission?
No, it would be more so in regards to if we end up running into a roadblock, what I would foresee is that they're gonna be able to really they're gonna have to show their work in regards to saying, oh, this is actually a health and safety issue, which is, oh, like essentially the geometry of this turning radius isn't appropriate. The grade of this drive is not, gonna be compliant for fire life safety. Those rules always trump everything we do here, honestly. So with that, then that's when we probably should then be like, oh, well, this is an iterative process, like Marisa covered, is that we need to go back to the drawing board and we need to refine this because it's not really actually what is going to work for us in regards to like essentially then coming back to you and trying to get an alternative. I guess that we'd have to probably explore an actual example because realistically, I can think of 2 different avenues that they'd be able to request a variation that wouldn't go to you. It just depends. We'd have to kind of, I think we'll probably find maybe one of those that we can chew away at a little bit over the next several months.
Okay. Then one final question. Marisa, you had on one of your slides, I didn't understand that clearly, something about something outside the domain. What was that? And I just want to understand what that means.
I think it was about, was it this?
Yeah,
No,
no offsite.
So that's what Nick was referencing just a minute ago. That we can develop objective standards that can be applied to the building itself and the building footprint and the building frontage. You know, ingress, egress, access, walkways, sidewalks adjacent, lighting adjacent, that kind of thing. But we can't request improvements that are off-site or adjacent to the site unless it's kind of what Nick was describing with the catching the grade on the curb ramp or something like
Okay,
that.
because I have a related question. When we get to the topics, we can bring that up.
So,
One final question.
yeah, go ahead.
So the 5 areas that we have identified, are they pretty, I mean, is that something that is being done before? Those are the 5 areas to focus on? Or is it something we're?
It's in our 3 questions to focus on today.
Okay.
One of them is
All right.
the list, but before you bring up the list, just stop at the 4 topic areas. So what I want to do now is just briefly see, not have a discussion on these topic areas. Just, does anybody have any questions on these topic areas? Or if you have any other potential topic areas in your head, do you have any questions on those? And then I'm going to go to public comment, then we're going to come back and we're going to start talking about these.
Okay, I'll just go back to my question then.
Go
Are
ahead.
those 4 areas are the pretty, is that standard practice? Have you seen this or is it something we're inventing these 4 areas?
So this list came from the meeting that I referenced with the planning department and with the legal team. I divided into these 4 categories based on what we talked about. It was kind of just a like a less organized list at the time that the meeting ended. But so all of these, like the bold headings at the top are kind of how I organize them, but all of these bulleted points are items that the legal team and the planning team thought were within our right to create objective standards about.
Okay. Any other questions on this list? Questions on this list or on other topics you're thinking of potentially? Go ahead.
So these are great potential topics. The sub bullets, do we have an opportunity to suggest maybe other sub bullets on there?
Yes.
Okay, so for garage standards, you mentioned one just a minute ago, which is, the grade of the ramp to go underground. If there isn't good bicycle access from the interior, they will have to travel down that ramp. And at a certain point, 11% grade is just too steep for a cyclist. You just can't. So, I don't know where that falls. All the experts in the room here, that the ramp, what grade is appropriate, what's not. The other thing we've talked about in the past as a commission is those driveway ramps that go down to the garage are so tempting for the kids on skateboards. They cannot resist them. And the disaster that can strike when they start to go down them. So we need to think a little bit about an attractive hazard that those might be, and how would we put in some objective standards so that we don't have skateboarders on those.
So I'm gonna interject just really quick,
Okay.
just to kind of give you like an initial design, kind of like feedback. Is that one of the things that you wouldn't inherently think, oh, it's a transportation planning thing, is we should then be requiring in our actual design standards, which is something that's applied under zoning, to say that those garages are actually gonna have like an architectural garage door as
Okay.
part of them.
Okay.
Which we're seeing that on First Street as it is, and it's kind of something that's organically happening. But you're absolutely right, especially in older developments that didn't think about, having a protective barrier for cars even, just to protect them from, being vandalized and people going down. That's one of the ways that we can do that, is to have
Okay,
that.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see some
So-
trees.
So I'm just gonna,
Converter harvesting happening.
so I'm gonna pause us for a second,
Okay.
because I think we're starting to get into the feedback round. So
Okay.
if there are no more comments on this, I'm gonna take public comments, then we're gonna do this feedback round. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. So let's open up the public comments. Does any member of the public have a comment on this? If you're on Zoom, you can raise your hand in the Zoom app. So it sounds like there aren't any public comments, so let's close the public comments. And now we can have this very conversation. And I don't know if we should go by person, or if we should just start one topic by one topic. And I'm kind of tempted to do one topic by one topic. But I have to encourage all of us, including staff, to kind of speak succinctly, because otherwise we're going to be here really late. So let's start with building frontage. Does anyone have anything that they would like to suggest on this in terms of what you'd like to see added, changed, removed?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what curb management means, but would stuff like loading, delivery, drop off, pickup type accommodations?
Yes, and I'll have Marisa, could you just define curb management for us?
Yeah, so curb management relates to the way that the curb is used, and what is allowed to be done there. So that involves like loading zones, and any other kind of ways that the curb is utilized.
Are there time constraints put on that? So I'm delivering something, do I have? Stay there 4 hours?
I mean, it's a standard that can be integrated as a part of, like a specific type of a loading space type of a situation. So I live in a community that it says very clearly 1 hour. Well, because they actually have two. They have one that's for deliveries like Grubhub type people. That's a 15-minute one. But then they have the one that's for very clearly more of a move-in people. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we could put in there curb management time.
Yes, time.
There a percentage number of have per number of curbs, part of cars.
Not for something like this. The only thing is that usually with curb management, you then have one subsection that then trumps it because of red curbing. So, I mean, then you get stuck in that. So that's one of those things we'll work through when we move forward with a curb management kind of a policy for.
And
the
we'll
city.
ask Marissa to chime in too, like, for the ratio of where they should be and also what's on those particular streets. And then in terms of time constraints, I don't think it's not just how many minutes you're on there, but also a loading zone might not be a loading zone on Sunday or after 5 p.m. or after 8 p.m. So all formats of time standards. Does anybody else have anything else for?
What about landscape? Are there any objective standards on landscape?
Yeah,
Do we
so-
require?
So I have a question. Oh, maybe that goes in the building frontage. In my mind, I was thinking there were some topics that weren't on here, and one of those was streetscape, and I was almost like, there's a fifth category called streetscape. You want to put it in building frontage.
I believe so.
So landscaping, yep.
Is there any objective standards we need to think about for monument signage for the development? many development sites that say, welcome to the Pinnacles, and they have a large, huge, gorgeous sign that says you're now at the Pinnacles. Is there just
So
out there?
We already do have a lot of standards for signage, and that's really more so the domain of, now location. That's where you guys could kind of weigh in. The actual signage itself, that's the planning. I will at least just tell you in order of operation, because I know you guys are already gonna be adding more bullet points to this. I would say that one specific topic is let's get to it next year, because signage is like one of the most contentious things in planning law. It's the nuttiest thing. But one of my first jobs, we went to the US Supreme Court over the signage, so let's avoid it until
Signage and
later.
traffic circles.
Yep.
So maybe we can keep good track of what's our hit list now and what's like
Right.
things for the future.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one of my questions for building frontage is, what if there's a bike lane in front of the building? Where is the loading zone and the Uber pickup and drop off going? Hopefully not in the bike lane, so that's one of my questions.
Bike lane gets trumped by
But it's
drop
just-
off and you have to merge to slow traffic.
But
That's what you do.
so let's take a look at this, because I think if the bike lane is trumped everywhere and then there's somebody comes, so let's put it on the list. Is what happens when there's a bike lane?
What about bicycle park? In other words, like the racks and the.
The bicycle parking is the one we already did.
In the last, when we did it, Valencia, in our joint meeting with the planning commission.
What do you would call the topic, either bike lane versus guard management?
Bike lane coordination. And yeah, loading zone, I mean, it's like, yeah, exactly.
So should we put down things that we've already covered? For some reason, so it's documented.
I think it's already documented.
Which one, sorry?
The bike parking
Well,
and
it's almost like
storage.
bicycle parking, but I'm just saying, list things that are already covered like that.
Yeah, I mean,
Things that are covered, things that are. just-
Does anybody have anything else for the building frontage? And it's fine to just put brainstorm ideas here.
Remember, it doesn't have to be exhaustive and it doesn't have to be perfect right now.
We're gonna revisit the old list, yeah.
As well.
For getting away with progress, people.
Okay, so
Start
that
with this.
sounds like we're done with building frontage. Let's move to access to the site. Anyone have any additions, subtractions? Or suggested edits for this particular list?
Where would the alleys land? Driveway vehicle ingress and egress, access to the site. And I know that is an off-site thing, but I want to keep that in our line.
Yeah, it could potentially be building frontage depending on the property. And it could be access. I know we've had a few driveways on.
Sorry, I had to do that.
What do you say?
Instead of building frontage, front, it's the building back.
Building backage, yes, exactly.
So one
Building
thing
adjacent.
I do just want to cover, just because I know you guys talked about it a little bit in regards to when Jim covered the CIP budget. One of the things that the city is currently doing is we're looking for our consultant right now to do our comprehensive fee study. A lot of what you guys want, so that's where I'll kind of try to help reconcile this once we have our exhaustive list of which one's like the low hanging fruit. Of what's the stuff that is gonna be the easy stuff for developers to not shake a stick at. Because inevitably, some of these things are like the alleyway one, to me, that's more of like a diff fee, so a development impact fee. Again, I'm very shocked we have never created one. It's another form of exacting things, and then being able to use it though, on the flip side, for, you know, a bigger improvement. And so some of them are gonna more so fall into that bucket where we're gonna wanna figure out what we're gonna wanna do as the city collectively, like in the long term. I think alleyway is probably one of those good ones because some of our alleys are quite tight in regards to once you factor in the poles and also garbage collection. So I just wanted to throw that out there because there's some of your stuff you guys might, I don't know if we need to get into too much of a back and forth. It's more like, yep, let's just put it there. And that's gonna be more of a city long-term thing that we need to nip in the bud.
That's good. Yeah, and I'd prefer to get these, once these ideas are coming out, get them down, even if they're not an immediate, that we
Right.
put them the next time around. And this is helpful to hear, and the building frontage, and the back does matter because as we find in some of the first street and some of the other ones, is that some of the ingress and egress is moving back there, some of the loading happens back there. So instead of building frontage, maybe
Right.
we may not be taking on the whole alleyway, but I think we need to start putting our eye,
Right.
think of this
Right.
in advance.
Curb management could apply to the alley.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that building frontage probably needs a, like, maybe a retitle package. Yeah. Let's see.
What does pedestrian and bicycle access mean in this context?
Pedestrian bicycle access is, for example, the pathway that leads from the sidewalk to the front door of the building, the pathway that might lead pedestrians into a garage if there is one, or the stairs
Okay.
that would lead pedestrians there. And then how is a bicycle accessing the site is a bicycle. I see a lot of buildings with underground garages that have signs that say no bicycles or no pedestrians. I see some that have even a bicycle like loop detector. So there's some differences there. So I think it's all about all those things.
Thank you.
And does it also mean what Suzanne was bringing up before is can the bicycles access the ramp or not? And ditto for pedestrians. Does that go on the driveway ingress or egress, or does that go on the access to the site?
I think of that as access to the site and that kind of last bullet point. And then as far as, yeah, so what I have there for driveway ingress and egress is pertaining to vehicles only. So the site distance and the audiovisual signs. Access to the site, I think, is how I was thinking of it, was for all of the modes.
And then in terms of the access to the site. Not getting in the nitty gritty here. I often hear you talking about, Commissioner Anvil, flooring, so it's non-slip and things like that. Is that because that comes up in a lot of our development reviews, is that something that we need to think about here? Or is that something that's taken care of some other way? What do we want to?
I think that's really in the weeds. I think let's keep this. Let's keep this at the big chunky things, and then
I just,
let's revise later if that seems to be a problem.
or if there's something you think we should have had. And the transportation team, like. Added it, when you bring these things back to us after you go do reviewing in other cities. Put in what you see as well that you think that would be relevant. But I want to bring that one up because you
Yeah.
bring that up all the time.
I think
reviews.
I want to keep this
Yeah,
up here.
so I
If
think
that's okay.
so I think that if nobody has anything else for access to the site, I think we can move on to driveway, vehicle egress.
For this one, I think that curb management kind of maps to this, because when you're pulling out of these sloped driveways, if you've got parking or drop off there, you often don't have line of sight. And so you're creeping out, and all of a sudden you're in the lane. So just wondering how you manage that line of sight on driveway exits for vehicles,
Yeah.
as well as for pedestrians walking on the street.
Yeah, for me, that one was the first bullet under driveway vehicle ingress egress, the site distance for driveway exits.
Okay, and that's for the driver of the vehicle to see, as well as for pedestrians to see the car coming out. Okay, perfect.
Does anyone else have? Cindy?
No, it's like, is that the other site? SIGHT?
Yes, it is.
So I think we already brought up the bike heads allowed on ramp or not. The other thing that we've sometimes seen in some projects. When do we require a stop bar at the top of the ramp? Stop sign, stop bar, or whatever. When don't we? And then at some projects, we've required a flattening of the space at the top. I think that's helped with the line of sight, like
How long should that be?
how long should it be? When does it get included? Does it depend on the slope? What's the standard? For some projects, I think we've talked about turn pockets when they enter in. I don't know if that's more of an, I'm not really sure, but do we need turn pockets? Do we need merge lanes? Like, how do we handle that in and out with the traffic? And there's one version of this on El Camino. And then there's another version on First Street where it's this little street filled with all kinds of stuff. And we talked about that at one of the other meetings as well too, was like, how much queuing should we have in the roadway? Or how much, or should there be a queuing space before a car gets into that closed area of the garage?
How far back the garage doors, second back, I guess, for clearance.
Yeah, how far? And does it have to clear the sidewalk or not? Or-
Yeah, I think the queuing, so I'll tell you right now,
Yeah.
from last
Yeah.
year that I've been here, the queuing standard is actually something I'm quite perturbed that we don't have.
So,
Yeah, it's and it's not just for garages, it's even actually for leading up to private drives. There usually should always be at least 2 car lengths, or if it's servicing more than one single family home. So yeah, we need to definitely make that one of the low hanging fruit priorities to
queuing standards.
accomplish. Yep.
So,
Is,
oh, go ahead.
not sure if this falls into driveway or garage standards, but there will be guest parking underground. Are there any standards we want to develop for, we're all full, don't come down here, or 2 spaces available? And then once you get down there, making sure there's enough turning radius for these extra large vehicles that are now suddenly so popular. I'm sure the developers think about that, but who knows? Throwing that in there as well. And then I know some people that have actually elevators in their garage and turntables so that they don't have to have a turning radius. Do we have standards for that? People get down, they get on the turntable and they turn their car around and go back out. Is that something we need to think about?
Nope, but we do need a standard for that, yes.
Okay, because that's pretty outlandish, but I can see that happening.
Let's
Yeah.
put 2 cars.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah, now the lift one, I'm gonna just interject, just so you know, because it's kind of the one thing that developers are kind of like, it's like their saving grace for a lot of them. I would say more focus on some of the other ones, because the lift standard thing, they kind of use that and they're able to, especially if they're applying density bonus, they just waive it and we can't really do anything about it. So that kind of ends up going more to like a parking garage engineer, that's just like what they do, and they engineer it for that specific design. It's weird, I know, but just be careful, because I'm just saying in regards to, until we get through some of these other ones, that would be another one that I would say would be
Next year.
second phase, not
Is there a
the
height
first.
or width or length, minimum maximum for vehicles? Like, if somebody's got like a pickup truck they want to put in there with.
Right, so that's one of the weird things, and that's where we would need to come up with somewhat of a ratio where it's like, well, not everybody has a Honda Accord. Some people have, SUVs that won't go onto stackers like that.
Somebody's got a Hummer.
Right, so you have to create more of a proportional ratio, is that, hey, so many of your spaces can be stackers. This is how many it can be, but this is how many you need for oversized or overheight vehicles.
And is that something you're saying we should do in the second trunk through this, or you're saying, or is there some aspects of lifts that we could do in the first trunk?
I would say probably to just do it in the second, because I think you might as well just kind of look at it as a holistic thing for
Okay.
parking garages, just because some people, it's just gonna be a part of the way that they get it to pencil
Yeah.
out.
Because I think lifts has come up often for us, and some of the things that have come up are this, what size car can get on there, and essentially, as I understand it, lifts have sizes. You can get the small lift to the extra large lift, and the extra large lift will hold a vehicle up to a certain size, and they have that spec. But the other kinds of questions that have come up for lifts are also, can somebody do an EV charging if they're on the lift? And some of the other things that have come up have been questions about backup batteries, like go back to our power outage, like is a car gonna get stuck on that lift? Yeah.
Well, one case too was somebody had the battery went dead on like one of the EV vehicles, and then it was in the basement, but they couldn't get any Wi-Fi signal to open it up, the car.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's any kind of, probably not. Any kind of standard that I mentioned, yes, some sort of Wi-Fi down there so that you could actually.
Yeah, interesting question.
Yeah, so some of those things are considered like amenities. So I'll tell you right now, I live in a very big complex. It's all concrete construction. Without the cell, they call them like amps. Without these, it's not a cell tower. It's literally like a Wi-Fi based like amp to increase all services. Without it, it's not just even like no bars. It's like literally your phone is dead. There's no way to even make an emergency call. So a lot of developers for multifamily install those anyways because of the type, but it also depends on construction types. And obviously if you're doing a podium structure, it's made out of concrete, so you don't get service.
Probably has so many levels too, like it's a
Correct.
story underground. A lot, but
Yeah, a lot of times there is some type of Wi-Fi, especially if it's the newer multifamily, because they all have, you know, little key fobs and they to some degree are running off of a Wi-Fi internet system. So yeah, it's something that we can look at as kind of like a parking garage management, like the policy for it is that if you have this, then you need to have this. So like, you know, if you're gonna do lifts, you need to have backup to at least lower them. Where then you create the kind of the securities and like go.
would that include like a backup generator?
I would advise not doing that. The council's not really prone to liking that discussion.
So you have pedestrian access for garage standards, what about bicycle access? Is that a do? Because most bicycle parking is gonna be.
I think it generally is. I deviate to Marisa for that one, and I think we might need to do some kind of analysis to see who has a really good, you know, adopted standard for that. I haven't seen one personally, but I thought
Just,
We did have one discussion in one of the development projects where they had the lifts, the bicycle parking was right next to one of the lifts.
right,
Yeah. and Didn't seem obvious that it was the same. It was the same thing to do.
Next to the vehicle lifts.
Yeah,
No, you're not meaning the elevator.
right. Not the elevator, I mean, the mechanical lifts, parking.
Yeah. Yeah, we're definitely concerned. And it's the point about
Yeah.
pedestrian safety, whether they're walking. It's a bicycle walking their bike into that garage, or whether it's kid getting out of the car, or a kid coming to get their bike to go to school, like how they're gonna navigate around safely. Okay, a couple other things.
the other thing I would say under garage standards would be, you know, moisture, when water collects down there, those going can get really slippery and quite dangerous, so I don't know if that's just a building standard that, or, you know, the big rain comes again and fills the garage.
So drainage.
Right, drainage, it's just, it can be tricky.
yeah.
Um,
The slickness on the surface, I can tell you that we'll have to look into that a little bit further. The drainage component, for example, 5150 is doing an extensive storm drain improvement. That's actually going to be beneficial, not to just its site. It's actually going to help do a main storm drain improvement on ECR. That they actually don't have to do. They're just wanting to do it.
maybe there's some lessons learned.
So that is just, you know, that is a component that's addressed through either engineering standards or the building code.
I have a couple other things in garage standards. Tandem parking. Are we allowing that? We don't get a lot of proposals for that, but that's something that we have not. We've recommended against here, and I think the developers who had proposed it took it out, if I remember right. And the concern from the residents is it'll push parking to the street. So it's that tandem parking is where you get two parking spots. One is right behind the other, and only the last car in can get out.
It's okay, it's just your own thing.
It depends. I think the usage depends. So I think that's the question. Are we having a standard on tandem parking? Is it allowed or not, et cetera? The next one would be, are we allowing, and maybe this is the thing where we're not, I don't know if we have ability to control this decoupling of parking from the the housing sales. Or can we?
There's
keep it
a
bundled?
weird
Yeah.
issue with not having it bundled. That,
Oh, bundled is good.
yeah,
We like bundled.
Yeah,
That's,
the-
I mean, previous.
yeah,
things.
to separate them, it's a financing nightmare for the developers, actually. You have to literally be like a San Francisco or New York in order to be able to justify the unbundle component, and we just were not
So you're
there.
saying you buy a place, you get 2 parking spots?
No, saying
Buy a place
You
and you
buy-
want to park a car, you have to pay extra to park your car and buy the place.
you have to buy the parking place separate than the unit place. And I think maybe we had, I can't remember, we had one proposal for that once and we kind of told them we didn't want that. So what you're saying is, I think, is kind of where we've always tended to think too, is don't decouple it.
Affordable housing.
Well, and that's actually that's where most of the developers, when they do the rental ones, which is not something we see terribly often, but what they do, they don't want to unbundle it because, or they get, it's not an incentive for them to unbundle because of the way that they're gonna still be locked into the affordability criteria for each individual unit. So it's, again, it's just all a bunch of math.
Anyone have anything else for these 4 topics here? And once we do, then I'm gonna ask for, does anyone have any other topics that aren't in these 4 buckets?
And then I don't think it applies, but building frontage, but things like fire hydrants. It's probably what or something, but I think that would apply.
Yeah, so Santa Clara County Fire is the one that ends up determining that we don't have any jurisdiction over it.
Another thing that often comes up at our meetings is the tow truck access to the garage. And particularly when they have a 2-story garage, some developers have not been able to confirm that they can get the tow truck in that 2nd story or not to pull the car out. So that always can, it's like, it's a small thing, I know, Stan, but the car actually gets stuck in one of the garages. Do you want to say anything about bikes on balcony or?
I think that is a bikes on balcony or something that is covered by the tenant T's and C's, and it's not an objective standard that we can apply. It's something that the homeowners association basically has to enforce if they even have one. So bikes in hallways, bikes on balconies, it's gonna happen. It's not our purview to say yay or nay, really. I don't think it's that.
I mean, I would agree, and I think a lot of in our bigger developments, of multifamily, again, most of them we're seeing are condos, so they're for sale products. And their CCNRs are pretty prescriptive for stuff like that. As well as we're not seeing some of our proposals that actually have terribly large individual outdoor spaces. It's more of the big thing right now is communal outdoor spaces. So they're not really giving that option anymore. So really that's where bike lockers and storage is going to actually be invaluable to most of the households in those type of complexes. So I don't think it's necessarily something we have to nip in the bud. And again, that's something though that we can actually on the back end amend the code for more of a code enforcement component because it's considered a property maintenance thing.
Okay, yeah. And it's all kind of wraps with this bundle of many of the development we've seen recently are quote underparked, both for the vehicles and for the bikes. So if you have a family, if you have a 3-bedroom unit, you've got 4 kids, you've got 4 bikes, you've got 2 cars, and you're given 1 and 1. And from a city's perspective, we have to figure out where is that spillage going to go? If there's no balcony and there's only storage for 1 bike, it's going to go in their condo, it's going to go inside the hallway. Where does that extra car go? That's where I start kind of going, ooh, we're going to have a capacity problem pretty quick. That's not here. It's outside the site and we don't have purview over it, but the city needs to come like, yeah.
So
Figure that out.
this is where I want to head next, is outside of these 4 categories, what else is on our list? And this was one of the things that I happened to write down. It's not maybe something that's objective standard per se for the developer, but I was thinking of some sort of parking analysis, not on-site parking that they're required to provide, but
And
what's available, what's needed, how are we gonna manage it? That
that's
kind
a
of,
conversation we need to pick up and move to another. I think we need to stick.
yeah,
But-
yeah, but I think that conversation needs to, it's not a building objective standard, but that conversation needs to be flagged as something that needs
We
to
can do
happen.
it,
Okay,
but not tonight.
so we're not having it tonight, we're making our list tonight. So other things, other categories that you might want to see. So we talked a little bit about landscaping with building frontage, and I think this is in the, it's really the streetscape. Which is the, anything in there for the landscaping or curb management, anything else coming out of streetscape for where we have a streetscape. There are places we don't have a streetscape. We do not have a streetscape for El Camino Real. First Street, we're gonna put one in place. The Loyola Corners one is really old. So this is also in the parking bucket. Is also the streetscape bucket. So just
Yeah.
keep that flagged.
Yeah,
And in streetscapes, all the green stormwater infrastructure stuff too. The other things that I wanted to flag was. And for you, because you're here, we once had a public comment many years ago. This is about construction mitigation. Someone who was visually impaired came in and told us that there was a development and there was no real sidewalk. This was when Suzanne. Before your time, Jim. And they basically said they were walking down the street and then there was no sidewalk and there was no warning and no whatever. So just this construction mitigation is really important. I don't think that's something we need to do for objective standards. I'm just assume that you're handling that. Is that correct?
well, so it goes as part of their construction management plan and then deviates into their encroachment permits, so. Whatever specific project was being referenced, that sounds like we. The previous director missed it, but it is something that's accomplished. I mean,
Okay,
Yeah.
so you got that bubble. Okay, great. And then the other one that I wanted to get clarity on is the major transit stop one. I don't think we have a real clear qualification definition of that, and I'd like to get us to that if MTC and VTA are able to as part of this process.
I can follow up with MTC because they are supposed to send
Yeah.
something out regionally.
Yeah.
With legal kind of, not interpretation, but guidance on it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I will say, just so that the commission knows, they are very firm now, and I've talked to 3 different of their staff. Is the MTC map that identifies the major transit stop that then has the radius bubble around it. That is what they advise, I guess, all jurisdictions, that means it's qualifying. So that's all that we can go off of right this second until they give us something more firm.
Yeah, I look forward to something more firm because I understand that, VTA staff have asked. I understand there's been people from other jurisdictions that are asking like, what is this? So thank you.
Yeah, the problem is, just so everyone also knows, is they're also trying to confer with OPR, so the Office of Planning Research, which is in Sacramento, it's under Gavin Newsom's authority, is they're trying to get final concurrence from them so that OPR makes it not just regional, but statewide. Essentially, this is what it is. Yeah. So.
Yeah, thank you. But having the clarity would be good wherever
Yeah.
it comes from. Thank you. And then I have a couple quick questions on the ones that were, it says items brought up in previous design, but covered by other standards. The garbage pickup procedures. Does the city have a contract with Mission Trails? Is that the will serve letter?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So I don't know how often that contract comes up for review or when it's due next, but the one thing I would like to flag is that some of these multifamily housing developments we have on garbage day, they have N number of recycle bins out there. And then if there's a bike lane or kids going to school or cars that need parking places, like, is that what we want? Or do we want a bigger recycle bin? And that's kind of something for you guys when that gets reviewed, and ditto for blocking the bike lane.
Do you have 60 recycling bins out front, or do you have 5 for the 60 units?
Right, yeah, and we've actually even talked about that even
Yeah.
at staff level, like with our downtown is centralizing things, we don't need that many. That's what my complex does even, so I mean, that's what makes sense. Inevitably, Mission Trails, depending on how it is, can somewhat vary in their approach. But yeah, it's when the franchise agreement is up for renewal.
Great.
Right?
Yeah, which is 2031, I think.
The franchise agreements are very long agreements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, question on, it's not on there, which is exterior lighting of the building.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I see coming is a large multifamily unit development not happening in a downtown area, but happening in or of a residential. These lots that come up that are 2 acres, you could easily put a very substantial development there, the whole nursery, for instance. I'm wondering if the development's going in there. Are there guidelines on exterior lighting at night so that it wouldn't light up the whole neighborhood?
There really isn't, and I'll tell you right
Okay.
now, there's been the talks about doing a night sky ordinance, which is essentially in a direct conflict with doing anything lighting related.
Okay,
I personally like, landscape lighting and things around the perimeters you see where you're traversing.
I'm talking more about. upper
Yeah,
floors.
but even that stuff, I mean, we don't have super prescriptive standards on that. At the end of the day, the one thing that we can't always enforce is that everything that needs to be shielded, so there's not light bleed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if that's not in the code, like we should put this in the.
Yeah, any standards for light poles, like lighting the walkways. and-
So one thing we do have in here is pedestrian scale lighting.
Lighting. Pedestrian scale lighting.
Okay.
And I was thinking, downtown, there's one complex, I think they're doing a community space on the top level. Right, and which is great, it's fabulous, but if that is in the middle of a residential neighborhood, it might not be so fabulous for the other residents. So I don't know where that lands. Just throw that out there.
Right.
Yeah, I think a lighting pedestrian scale lighting, the building lighting, and I think this night.
The night sky.
Yeah, I think that's a good
Yeah.
thing too. So while we're here, I know there's one thing, Director Zorn, that you brought up that you're like, I don't know why we don't have it. We should have that. Great, let's have that. So what else is on your list and what's on Jim's list and what's on Marissa's list? Let's get that on our list too. So what else is on your list?
Well, some of these are the Marissa uses what me and Eric Ramakrishnan kind of just spitballed off of the ones. The curb cut standard, we need to figure that out. We have a development that they wanted to do curb cuts like every 5 feet from each other because they were gonna do essentially drive up townhomes. That would be literally like that's wonky for the sidewalk. That's not fun. So we need to have a spacing requirement, which would have helped nip that in the bud a little bit, would require even them just to consolidate, because it was gonna be a 4-unit development. That's just a very specific example. I do think like the stop bar, like you mentioned, and also just garage signage. I don't think that we need to get super prescriptive in regards to what we say it has to look like, but that, hey, here's your like 5 bullet points. You have to have a stop bar, you have to have pedestrian, kind of like crossing signage. Some of the stuff that you think is inherently kind of simple, but it gives them their playground to know exactly what they are expected. Those are some of kind of like the big ones that I can think of off the top of my head. Again, also just like perimeter lighting. So when we get to like building lighting, we're gonna have a little bit of, that's gonna be maybe one of the generalized kind of suggestions that you make to the planning commission, because that's their wheelhouse for the building. However, the perimeter lighting, when it comes to actually what's surrounding the public realm, that's something that can easily just be a standard that you recommend that, hey, this is what we want for public realm. And then that obviously bleeds around to the surrounding perimeter of the property. The building itself, obviously, like I said, that's going to be more of them to look at that.
Great. And Marissa, Jim, anything on your guys' wish list?
This list came from me, so I think all my stuff is included
Your
for
wish
now.
list is here.
And I am presenting my wish list to you, and I think for all of us as we do precedent research and see what other cities are doing, it'll trigger a lot of ideas for us that we won't necessarily come up with sitting in this room in a more insular environment. So I think that'll be a good time to consider other things too.
Or Sparky.
And
No, I'm just kidding.
existed in this place a long time ago. So I would just encourage you guys to, you know, if there's things that you're really wanting or things that you find as you go through, move as much on as you can. Okay, so can you bring up those 3 questions? And I think we answered the first one, but let's quickly answer the other 2. Yes, and quickly. Not quickly bring it up, quickly answer those for us. Okay. So,
I'm chill on the timeline.
yeah, me too. Another thumbs up. Anyone else? Yeah, another head nod. We're good. Number 3.
And I think number 3 is not that important. I just thought if anyone had any thoughts right now on precedent research.
Question. So can you give us a list of documents or standards that exist today that may be interesting to this conversation? I'm thinking about like the NACTO guidelines. There's a lot of published, you know, size and shape and color and width and all that stuff in the NACTO guidelines, and they're written more in a person's terms rather than professional terms, like the Green Book or the NHTSA, right? That's, but if there's other things like that you've seen, studies or guidelines that are more for the average citizen, that would be helpful. I don't know how many of you have ever read the NACTO guidelines.
I just joined.
They're wonderful. Look at this. So if there's anything like that we should be looking at, maybe there's stuff from like law, maybe there's stuff from the league, that you've seen that's been interesting, you know, pass them along. Do we have to stick to California standards? Can we look beyond California? Nobody says, well,
Yeah, I mean, you can't, it's just you have to be cognizant of which,
right.
honestly, which state it's coming from. No.
Minneapolis is really
yeah.
hard with what they've done. New York City has
If
done.
we're not allowed to travel there, I would say that you're not allowed to use it. No.
They've done some amazing things in Lahaina.
Yeah, no, honestly, you can for these types of standards, like when people ask me about zoning ones, I'm like, it's really dicey. So these ones, I mean, there's really good national examples of stuff. International, I would veer from. We're nowhere near what they do in the Netherlands.
That's a whole nother, yeah.
Yeah.
So if there's anything like that you could recommend for us to sort of, read at our leisure, that would be, I think that would be helpful for everybody. Yeah, maybe the layperson's guide to SB8. I've got that already.
Yeah, I think this was great. And if there's also when you're doing the research, if there's a particular city or cities that you think have done a good job, like feel free to direct us to those.
Or just an utter disaster, an utter failure. That would be, I mean, you can learn from
Or
that.
potentially what you were saying up there, like Huntington Beach got sued by the state,
Yeah.
what were the violations there?
Housing.
Well,
It's
it's
waiting
a
till the-
location.
So the other one to add that I would be curious to learn more about, the VTA has just updated the Community Design and Transportation Manual. And that's supposed to be for developers and supposed to be for you guys or us. And they haven't really given a presentation on it, so I don't know if it's appropriate to have them come here and ask them to give us a presentation on it. Yeah, I think so too, actually. That could help. And I think, I don't know if we need a brief informational item to give us an update on where the city's VMT, I know the council adopted a VMT policy, but I think it was changed after it left here. And the transportation demand management and the checklist to kind of give us a sense of where that's at. So we're kind of up on the same as we come back and give recommendations. So we're on top of
Yeah, so I'll give you guys a little bit of an example, because obviously you don't trigger it until you have a project.
Yeah.
So, in the CEQA. So we do have one project that's currently kind of underway. I think that would be kind of a good test case is once it gets fully through the discretionary review process to see kind of what some of like the best practices. And find out like, how did it get applied? Was it actually, working the way it's supposed to? We can obviously design whatever we want in theory on paper, but until we get to application, sometimes we don't know.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful for us. Okay, so if nobody has anything else, then I think we'll close this item, and it's getting late. So let's close item number 4, and now we're moving to commissioner reports and comments, and let's try to expedite here. Anybody have any reports or comments? Go ahead.
This is my last meeting. I'm gonna step down. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Abiel, for
No, I've been doing this I went back and looked. I joined the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee in 2009. When I've been rolled over and rolled over and rolled over, and here I am today, that many years later. And so I'm gonna step down. I looked at my calendar for the rest of the summer and realized I was gonna miss June. Didn't have one in July. I was gonna miss August and September because of business travel. So it's not fair to hold you all hostage. And so now's my time. And so I wish you all well. Good luck with your objective standards and.
So thank you for the contributions you've made to the city and the committee and the commissions and all of them that you
And I
served on.
remember when the city used to spend more money on the flowers downtown than on any bike infrastructure. Year after year, I look at the budget and go, damn it, we spent more money on flowers. How are we gonna change that? And so we've come a long way. We don't spend that much money on flowers. compared to- That's right. And so it's thanks to the city and changing the parks. Thank you.
We don't have a special recognition for you this evening.
You missed something in your pen.
Well, that's not- but there used to be the special rule.
Oh, I did those. I did those.
So you were, okay, I was gonna have to figure out who did those, and now I know
I
who
did
did
that.
those. Okay,
People. Oh,
well, we might
Okay,
have to see.
thank
yeah.
you all.
Thank you.
That's my last meeting.
Okay, well, now let's move to staff announcements. Does anybody on staff have any announcements to make?
I have one. This may or may not be my last meeting, but my last day of work is August 15th. I'm retiring. So
Yes.
that's.
Congratulations.
What? No, I'm sorry.
No, because I'm headed down this path. I'm looking right at that.
Congratulations.
My God.
Congratulations. Any other updates from staff?
Please stop. Stop.
Yeah, please stop.
I will add to the commission, just so that you guys are aware, since Jim covered CIP for transportation, and it is going to be transportation related. It won't happen right away. Is we are budgeting and forecasting for our actual comprehensive general plan update, which one of the biggest components of the general plan is the circulation element. Who knows, we might change it to call it the mobility element, you never know, and to it for rebrand when we do the document. But that is something that we will be initiating next year. Which obviously that specific part of the general plan will be something that is the focus of the CSC. So I just want to at least mention that since Jim did a good job of covering all of the stuff transportation related, and it is going to be a component of it is transportation related, but that's going to be forecasted over a 2.5 year process, obviously. So just so everyone's announced.
Thank you. If there's nothing else on the staff announcements, then, and let's go quickly here. Any requests for potential future agenda items? We have a retirement party. I second that.
Sure.
And seeing none others, then let's go to adjournment at 9:50 PM. So good evening, everyone, and the recording will stop soon.
I knew there was. Questions. Yeah. Yeah.